All right, well, are we ready to begin with your thing there? All right. Well, I'm Fred Edwards. I'm National Director for the United Coalition of Reason. I've been involved in the Humanist and Freethought movement for over 30 years, which included a stint for 15 years as Executive Director of the American Humanist Association, and a stint for a dozen years as Editor of the Humanist magazine. So I've been doing a lot of stuff. And I was also the Communications Director for the AHA when they ran their bus campaign last winter. And got me on the Bill O'Reilly show, and that went rather well. And you can watch that Bill O'Reilly segment. And here's how you do it. You go to YouTube, and then you just type in Fred Edwards. And spell my name right, last name E-D-W-O-R-D-S. And so you type my name in there, a few things will come up, but the first one is the Bill O'Reilly show. So you'll see a picture of the bus on the TV screen. You just watch that, because in some of the stuff I'm going to cover here, you will, after you've heard all of me talk about it, then you watch that and you say, oh, okay, so I see how we use all this stuff. So it works, and if it worked for me, it worked for you. It's not really that hard, you just have to think these things through and know how. All right, now before you can begin to work with the media to advance ideas like ours, you need to be persuaded first in your mind that there's a point to doing this, that we have ideas of value. And not only that we have ideas of value, but that our ideas are and ought to be recognized as mainstream. Now, we oftentimes don't think of our ideas as mainstream because we tend to think of the non-theistic part. But in fact, reason is used by smart shoppers everywhere. And the idea of compassion, I mean, people believe in that. Our basic humanistic principles are pretty much endorsed by most people. They just don't want to admit it because they say it's caused by other things or whatever. But the fact remains that our ideas are not only in many ways mainstream, but to the degree that they differ from the mainstream is where our ideas are necessary to make the world a better place. Because if we don't get rid of some of the problems that we have, if we don't maintain our separation of church and state, if we don't do things like end torture and stuff like that, we're going to have a lot of bigger problems in the world. If our country doesn't stop making enemies all over the world, we're going to continue to have difficulties. So clearly, and saving the planet, saving the environment, all the things that we believe in, these things are necessary and valuable, and therefore you have to be on board with that idea. And that's the thing, because and to remember that even the most science-denying creationist and faith healer still uses or benefits from all the fruits of modern science and technology. We're just trying to be more consistent. So since we have a lot to offer, then it's important to get more people thinking along our lines, and that's one of the reasons to use the media, to get the word out. Now, when you get the word out, our aim is not to proselytize. Nothing wrong with it, mind you, but it's not very effective as a use of your time. The time it takes, if you think how long it took you to come to the viewpoint you have, you realize that it's not very productive to try to get people into your groups by changing them, okay? So a fundamentalist church isn't usually your best venue for finding a suitable audience. Our task is to let the people who already agree with us, but maybe don't use the same words as we do to describe their philosophy, get the people who already agree with us to find us. So our message is basically, hey, we're over here. Here's who we are. We're just like you. Come find us.
We don't bite.
Right. Hence the wording of the billboard. Don't believe in a God? In other words, are you like us? Do you not believe in God? Well, you are not alone. We're over here. And then the URL at the bottom, come find us. You get the publicity for that. It's an innocuous message. People react to it like as though it were a hostile message, but it's not. Not a hostile word in it. It's just addressing our audience, speaking to our people, but we got to get lots of publicity or not enough of our people find out, because we don't have a demographic that all live in certain neighborhoods or something like that. We're scattered all over, and hence we have to make a big splash for our audience to find it, and that's what we do. All right, so among the ways that we get our audience to find us is to write letters to the editor. Now tell me a little bit about the letters to the editor sections in the papers that you have. I know you have one major paper, but there are also usually community papers, weeklies, various other things. How active are the letters sections in various weeklies, and tell me a little bit about what it's like in your main Houston paper.
In the main Houston paper, it's very active.
Okay.
You know, people have expressed some vociferous opinions of things that...
Are any of our types of people been able to get letters in that paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
There isn't no reason to believe that the Chronicle censors letters to the editor unless they use fuller words or something. So,
Right.
yeah.
Now, when someone is an official with an organization and they sign the letter with their official title, thus naming the organization, does that get tacked on to the letter?
I believe so.
Yeah, unless you ask us, it doesn't. Yeah.
Right.
Rather than just Joe Citizen, it says, you know, Tom Smith, president of X and X or whatever.
All right. The reason why that's important is because, going back to the point of saying we're over here, in this age of the internet and Google, you don't have to give a URL, you don't have to give a phone number, you just have to give the name of your organization, and people can Google it and find you. So you got to keep giving the name of your organization. So when you write a letter to the editor, you got to work the name of the organization in there somehow, either saying in the text, I was at a meeting of the such and such group and this came up, or if you've got some active letter writers in your membership and you like the letters they write, they're not going to embarrass you by the things they say, then give them some sort of highfalutin sounding title that they can put below their name when they write those letters, and put the name of the organization, put the name of your group, and that gets the name of your group out there. It acts as like a little mini advertisement for your group. That's the advantage of these letters to the editor. Very often when people write letters to the editor, they think, oh, I'm going to make a point. Oh, I'm going to change some minds with this. Oh, I'm going to respond to something. I'm going to debate somebody. And that's all very fine. But the point is, the reason for doing it from an organizational and PR standpoint is to get your name out there and a sample of your ideas out there. So you don't try to explain everything. You don't try to explain everything there is to know about atheism or humanism or whatever. You give a sample of your ideas and you attach your name to them. The people who like your ideas, they'll come find you. But there's another advantage in writing letters to the editor, and this is where it's important to use your real name. And that is that if you later want to do other things, like get on TV or have reporters pay attention to you, then you need to have letters published over your name so that when people Google your name, they find that you are an opinion leader in the community because you get these letters published. It makes you somebody. And people do Google these things. Employers do. We all know employers Google the names of the people they might hire to see what kind of mischief they've been up to on the internet. So do reporters. So do radio talk show hosts. They want to know, is this person anybody? Why should I bother with this person? So you make yourself somebody by getting letters published. All right, so then it's important to do it well. Now, letters sections, too, are among the most highly read sections in newspapers. So you're going to be able to get your ideas out there more effectively in letters. I think one of the reasons people like to read letters is because they're usually short. You don't have to read a whole long article to get an idea. And we live in a kind of a blip culture where people like to get little short snippets of things. So this is a chance to get your oar in the water relatively easily. And you don't have to be a reporter to do it. Also, politicians read letters sections because it gives them the pulse of the public. So you actually get double duty. You reach a politician when you write letters to the editor. Although there's nothing wrong with then taking any letter you've gotten published, clipping it out, sending a copy of it to your politician, and they might pay more attention to your opinion now because somebody else thought it was important enough to publish. So there's all sorts of ways to work these things. Now, the best way to use letters to the editor are to correct or interpret recently released facts or biased articles, to explain the connection between a news item and your issue of concern, or to praise or criticize a recent article or editorial. Most papers publish letters to the editor that are in response to something they publish, but they usually don't just publish random opinions. Nonetheless, there are ways that you can get letters published that don't directly respond to something that they've published. And that is, if there's an anniversary date coming up, you take something like Darwin's birthday, okay? And if you get your letter related to the subject and you tie it in with some current event in the community, and you get that letter in like a week or a few days in advance of Darwin Day, then they're likely to publish it. Or there may be another important humanist, freethinker, atheist in history, or some anniversary date, the Haymarket riots, or whatever, that you want to talk about and relate it to something today. And if one of these anniversary dates is coming up, you can put a letter to the editor in the paper by sending it in advance of that date, and you create a bit of an information opportunity to educate the public. Thomas Paine's birthday. How many people in the general public have heard of Thomas Paine? They don't really realize how important he was because he's been maligned so much and erased from a lot of the high school history books and stuff like that, or just kind of diminished to this guy who wrote, these are the times of trying men's souls, and that's all you ever hear, a quote from him in a high school textbook. So, this is your chance then to get some of our ideas in there. Another way to do it too is if there's a decision that's going to come up by some court, or there's a vote that's going to be taken by some legislative body, you can be ready with your opinion as soon as that vote comes down. They'll probably publish an article about it, so you can go ahead and have your letter to the editor ready to roll on that one, whichever way it comes out. Another thing to keep in mind on letters to the editor is that newspapers want the local angle. They want it to relate to the community. If you're just talking airily about global issues, you're less likely to get your letter published than if you can relate it to the audience of that newspaper, which means if you're doing one of the community weeklies or anything else in any of the papers in any of the smaller communities around, and you should try those too, then you need to relate it to that newspaper's audience and that community. So the basic rules to keep in mind on letters to the editor is it needs to be timely, that you need to stay on message in your letter to the editor. You can't cover too much ground. You have basically one point that you're trying to make and you just elaborate it, maybe with a couple of subpoints, but you just get a basic idea across. You're not trying to tell your whole philosophy, you're just trying to get a basic idea across. Save your whole philosophy for essays on your website. But letters to the editor, you want to be punchy and get that idea out there. Get local and get personal. Use local statistics, use personal stories, use the names of legislators and other public officials where relevant. If you have credentials in a particular area, go ahead and refer to them if they're relevant to what you're writing about. And if you don't have credentials, something that stands in for credentials with a lot of people is an anecdotal story of your own experience. Well, this happened to me. The public really buys into that. This happened to me, so it must be true. I mean, we know that's anecdotal evidence. We know that that doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny, but we're trying to get ideas out there. So if you can relate it to something that happened to you, it gives people a chance to put themselves in your shoes. Maybe people don't see things your way precisely because certain things have never happened to them. For example, if someone's a member of a majority religion, they don't often know how it feels from the other side. And this is a chance to show maybe them how it may feel from the other side to be inundated by all these Christian messages, and then the moment you put up a billboard that suggests that maybe there's no God, all of a sudden they're all over you, like as though you've destroyed something, or that you're forcing it on them, or you're imposing your views on them, and yet it's on our money, it's in the Pledge of Allegiance, it's on other buses and billboards, and yet they seem not to think that that's enough. So sometimes it's worthwhile giving these personal things. And then you follow up. Don't be discouraged if your letter isn't printed. You can send a revised letter with a different angle at a later date or to a different publication. So you can just stay with it. Now, one thing you can't do with letters to the editor is you can't treat them like press releases, in that you can't send the same letter to multiple papers, because they're going to ask you, has this letter been sent to anybody else? And you need to be honest, because if you're dishonest about that and they later find out you're sending your letters all over the place, then you'll go on their blacklist. You'll never get another letter published with them. So you only want to send a letter to a particular publication. Now, that doesn't mean you can't send essentially the same letter to some other publication, but you have to rewrite it a little bit, phrase it differently, rearrange the paragraphs and the sentences so it's a different letter, even if you're making the same point.
Do you have to tell the publication that I've sent similar letters?
No,
or you just don't say?
No,
Okay.
they don't care about that, and they're not asking about that. Another thing is they're going to call you, so you need to have a phone number so that they can reach you, because they're not going to publish a letter if they can't call you and verify that it really came from you. Because people have written letters as though they were from somebody else, and then the paper gets into trouble, somebody gets embarrassed, and so on. So they're always going to call you, and it's a good sign when they do call you, because that means there's a good chance your letter's about to go in if they call you to verify that you wrote it. So it's always good news. And usually if they call you, your letter goes in. It's not an absolute guarantee, but usually. So now, the best way to to write a letter the right way is to learn the right way for that publication, because each publication has its different rules. Some publications like longer letters. Other ones want really short things. They want you to do it in 50 words or so. So you have to learn what their rules are. And since the easiest way to do that is you go online to the particular newspaper and you find their letters section online, and there they will post their rules for letters. And everybody wants everything by email today, electronically. So, and sometimes they even have a little form right on the website page there where you're supposed to type your letter right into their little box. So what you can do is you can prepare your letter in a word processing file, and then just and plug it right in there. Now, if you send the email yourself to them, to the email address that they want you to send it to, do not put any of the attributes in your letter. That is, no boldface, no italics, no large headlines, none of that stuff, because that stuff has coding with it, and that coding they have to get rid of if they're going to plug it into their newspaper and so on, because they need to recode it for their format. So just plain vanilla ASCII, just text-only emails. And the same is the rule with press releases. Text only. Also, never put a file attachment with your email message, because newspapers are always worried that somebody's going to send them a virus. So if you have an attachment you want them to see, you give them a web URL where they can go get it. Or you offer to send it to them separately. But in the case of a letter to the editor, you're not going to have attachments. You're just going to send this text-only letter within the word count that they lay out. And then you have a good chance of getting published. All right, any questions on this?
You're going to give us a handout?
I am. And
Chapters of
this is a very useful public speaking technique for you to learn. Do not give your handout out until after you have made your point, so they're not reading your handout while you're talking.
I mean, that's, how do I say this in a sensitive way? A lot of people aren't reading newspapers anymore, and so that's a maybe a useful technique. What about for new media type things?
Blogs.
I mean, you have blogs and things like that, but I mean, would you recommend commenting on, like the Houston Chronicle has comment sections on every story that they publish online?
Yeah.
And I mean,
Definitely,
you can get 200, 300,
yes.
400 and,
Indeed, there are some publications that are themselves electronic only
Right.
publications. They have letter sections too. So yes, you can write letters that way. Sometimes they publish letters to the editor of the newspaper in the online edition only that don't get in the print edition.
right.
That's okay too. And yes, writing comments to articles is another way of getting your oar in the water, especially if all the comments are going the wrong way. And this is a chance for you to balance it out. But again, try to work your organization in there. Have as your signature line,
Right.
the name of your organization. So,
And the website.
yeah, and the web URL, and don't overdo it. They might delete it if they think you're pushing too hard. Now, I'm going to cover some of that when I get to
Okay.
using the electronic media, but,
Alright.
so this is traditional media at this point. But nonetheless, there are online analogs to traditional media, and you can do the same thing. So, but enough people are reading papers that they're still in business, but they're not as many in business, and the business is not as big. That's true. Okay. Now let's go to press releases and press conferences. Now, press release kind of picks up where a letter to the editor leaves off. Some of the same rules apply in a press release that apply in a letter to the editor. It has to be timely, that it has to have local interest, that it needs to stay on message, that it needs to really only make one point, needs to have some kind of, maybe a personal element, it needs to have a kind of relevance and grab you. Now, in a letter to the editor, it's always good to have your first sentence be something that's going to reach out and grab you. Something that you say strikingly in the first sentence, and then you work through. Well, this is particularly important in a press release, because you need in a press release to have a headline, and the headline on your press release becomes the subject line of your email. You are going to send your press releases by email. So the subject line and the headline needs to be something that's going to catch the eye of the reporter, because that's the only chance you have of catching the reporter's eyes when they first look at the subject line of your email. Reporters have said that they take pride in how many press releases they can delete unread per minute. Okay, so they're going to sit there hitting the delete key. They got all these press releases coming into their inbox, and they're reading just the subject line. And if it doesn't grab them, it goes into the trash. Just boom, boom, boom. So you got to grab them in a few seconds. So you need to have an arresting headline, a subject line. And that means that in the subject line, you're going to be a little more outrageous, let's say, than you will actually be in the body of your press release, or that will actually be covered in the article. You're just trying to reach out and grab the reporter. So you may say things a little differently in that subject line. You may not repeat that theme in the body if it's a little too flamboyant, but that's okay. You got to get it across. But here's some things that I've used. National Day of Prayer versus National Day of Reason. Puts a conflict up. You've heard of the National Day of Prayer. Okay, so it sounds like a religious article. Versus National Day of Reason. Whoa, what's this? And why is it versus? What's wrong with prayer? Immediately gets some attention. Celebrating the holidays without God. A humanist alternative. Holidays without God? Okay. Then you can use strong language. Humanists slam repressive taboos. Nice strong thing there. Or something that sounds counterintuitive. New Center launches secular Sunday school. Secular Sunday school? What's this? Anything like that. Or atheist Sunday school. You know, anything like that that just makes them think twice.
Or their curiosity.
Build curiosity by doing things, by putting opposites together, or what are opposites to them? They may not be opposites to us. But now we come to my favorite word that never seems to fail me in headlines. New Center to teach godless ethics. That word godless is golden. And I mean, it works for me every time. That we're getting together all these godless groups in a coalition. and all of this kind of thing. That is just such a powerful word because people don't expect you to send them a press release with the word godless in the headline, especially if the word godless is used in a favorable way. It's like, what about it? But we are godless. We're not ashamed of that. There's nothing wrong with being godless. It's kind of irrelevant in a way because, that isn't the focus of our lives, but nonetheless, it's arresting. It's a grabber. So I find all sorts of ways to do it. I'm looking for the ultimate opportunity to speak of that wholesome, godless goodness. Haven't used that one yet, but that's the idea. Is to kind of shake them up a bit. Something striking that's different. That's man bites dog. Again, your press release and that headline, it needs to have relevance, needs to be important or interesting, timely, catch the wave of some trend that's going on, giving whatever your story is a free thought connection. It has to have good timing. If you're responding to a news story in the papers, then you have to hit, well, the story's hot that day. If you're sending a press release out about something you're doing, you have to send it out early in the week. George W. Bush knew how to do press releases. When he had stories that he didn't want his comments being widely known of, something that he had to let the media know about, but he was rather embarrassed about, he would send out his press releases on Friday. That's the Friday afternoon news dump. That's where you get ignored. Okay, so if you want to get ignored, as he did on certain kinds of press releases, that's when the White House would send them out. So don't you send out anything on Friday unless you want to be ignored, okay? And there's no reason for you to do that. You send it out Monday morning or Tuesday morning, 9 or 10 a.m. If you are interested in getting the religion reporter to cover your story, religion reporters have their stories assigned to their editors and they're already working on them by Wednesday afternoon. You got to get to the religion reporter and pitch your story before Wednesday afternoon or it is not going in that next weekend's paper. That's that. Them's the rules. So, so hit early in the week with religion reporters in particular, but whenever you can, hit early in the week. Now that doesn't mean things always happen early in the week, and sometimes you have to hit it at another time. But whenever you can, in the morning, because that's when they read their mail, that's when they plan their day, that's when the editors start assigning stories. They just, people say, okay, these press releases came in, let's talk about them. They have a meeting, they go over them, and then they start giving writing assignments. So you need to get in the AM, not the PM. You write your press release in Associated Press news style. That means a number of things. It means, first of all, you write it objectively. A press release is your ideal news story. This is not you opining. You don't editorialize in your press releases. Just as if you were a reporter writing a story. You don't editorialize. You don't say, this is outrageous. Instead, you have the president of your organization say within quotes, this is outrageous. That's the way you handle it. So you can get opinions in there, but you need to put them between quotes. You need to have somebody say those things. This becomes an official statement of your organization. Nobody worries where you said it or when you said it. Oh, was it at a meeting? Did anyone actually do it? You don't have to act it out and actually have anybody say it. That becomes your official statement when you put it in quotes. And they accept these things. So-and-so said this today. That counts. And they'll quote that. Or if they don't want to use those canned quotes, and a lot of times if they're doing a story they'd rather not, they'll call you up, and then you just need to say essentially the same thing to them, because if you're going to still use the same lines of argument, you're going to make the same points. Say the same thing to them in maybe slightly different words, and then they'll put that in the paper, and that gives them something unique, and they're not just getting the same quote that everybody else gets. So a lot of papers do that. AP News Style also means that when you have a series of words, like this, and that, you don't put a comma before the last and, because they're just going to have to edit that comma out. I mean, I'm used to putting the comma before the last and because I'm used to writing according to the Chicago Manual of Style, but Associated Press is different. You need to follow Associated Press rules when writing press releases, because if it's a newspaper, that's what they're going to convert it to anyway, and they get annoyed if they have to keep fixing your stuff over and over again.
Are there guidelines?
Yes, you can get the AP style manual in your public library, or you can look up elements of it online. Another element of it is the way they handle numerals. That you use numerals from 1 to 10, no, correction, you spell out the numbers from 1 to 10, and then you start using numerals after that. With the Chicago manual style, it's 100 when you make a changeover. But, so with AP style, you're going to spell out the numbers. And even in the same sentence, you might speak of the number 1 and you spell out O-N-E, and then you might speak of 22 things and you put 22. So even in the same sentence, but that's the way this works. So it's always good if you're going to be writing a lot of press releases, or even letters to the editor, to look up an AP style guide in your public library, or look up some rules online and familiarize yourself with many of these things. Because particularly in small town newspapers, weeklies and things like that, if you want to write an op-ed or you want your press release published exactly as you wrote it, a lot of times they're so busy on these weeklies, they don't have time to write a new story from your press release. They'll just publish your press release as is, if you wrote it in proper AP style and if it reads objectively. And if it works as a story, they'll just slap that thing in there, and that takes care of that. That's all the editor does. Is the editor's more like a scrapbook collector, and the weekly newspaper is oftentimes more like a scrapbook than it is actual reporting. So make their job easy. Now, I mentioned about timing on a story. You see, oftentimes people think that when they send out a press release, they have to be sending out a release about something they're doing. Now, usually your typical meetings are not press release worthy, okay? You have some speaker coming to speak about some interesting topic, you probably won't get any attention. Now, if that speaker's from out of town, that's different, because then they really don't know if this person's important or not, because they're from out of town. So if you say they're important, they must be important. If they're from out of town, well, that gives them special cachet. So go ahead and maybe publicize the meetings where you have someone who you can tout who's from out of town, who's big. And so those are the kinds of things. And if they're going to do something really earth-shattering or interesting at the meeting, then you've got press release worthy stuff, maybe. But another thing that you can do is you can get out a press release that merely comments on the news of the day and get into a story. Here's the way you do that. If you happen to know, and this is harder for volunteer organizations, but if you happen to know, as I mentioned earlier, if a certain court decision is coming down or a certain legislative decision is going to be made, you can write your press releases for that ahead of time. That if it comes one way, you send out one press release. If the decision comes the other way, you send out the other one. You deplore the vote, or you deplore the decision, or you praise it, whichever. You have them both written and ready to go. And then you watch as soon as the news comes, which means you have to get your news on the internet. It will not do for you to read it in the paper and then send out your press release. Too late. The only way you're going to get in the story and have them quote you in the story is if you get that story when it breaks on the wire services on the internet. A lot of the newspapers have, AP stories on the internet, and you just have somebody watching it. As soon as it's posted, bang, the press release goes out, or maybe you modify it in the light of the actual developments, and then you send it out. And if your press release is one of the first ones out of the gate to get to that paper, then there's a great likelihood that they're going to use it and they're going to quote you in their story. So when they report on the reactions to this court decision or whatever it is, you get to be one of the reactors who's in their story. If you don't do this, then they're just going to go to the usual suspects that they always go to. It's usually some preacher or somebody. If it's a church-state issue and the court maybe does the right thing, then they're going to get the religious people's opinions that may be negative or positive about it, and they'll never consult you. But you want to be consulted on these things. So you've got to get your opinion in there, and you've got to be first with it, because you're not in their Rolodex. And so you need to get yourself in their Rolodex by opining on issues of the day until they get to know who you are. And the more you do this, pretty soon they start calling you. When something happens, they'll call you. Well, this just happened, and I'd like your opinion. And you need to be ready with an opinion right there. You need to be able to think on your feet, and you can get into the story that way.
That's happened with Roy, hasn't it? That whole
Yes.
system. that you
And
were
it's
talking
happened with
about.
me. I've had the media call me up. At random, I had CNN contact me. Just all of this stuff that's going on. They contacted me out of the blue because they were doing an in-depth story on that still hasn't run yet on a number of things, and so they wanted to interview me and as part of it. And so they called me, yeah. Because I've been in the news enough times with all these coalitions that I've been starting and all of these billboards we've been erecting and all that. My name's out there. You Google my name. I mean, I don't know, 26,000 hits now, whatever it is. Anyway, so I'm easy to find, and people know that I've had something to do with news stories of interest. Now, when you have quotes from somebody in your press release, make sure that the person who you're quoting has agreed to that quote. That if you're the press release writer, you better make sure you have permission from that person, because the one thing you never ever want to have happen is have the reporter call up and be talking to that person, and that person says, well, no, I really didn't say that. Then no one's going to listen to you anymore. No one's going to read your press releases anymore because you're not reliable. So make sure that you stand by the quote.
You
Now,
get to cry wolf once.
yeah. And in fact, if you find that, oops, we shouldn't have said it that way, we could have said it in a better way, then create a longer quote that includes that quote. And you say, yes, I did say that, but here's the rest of it. But let me flesh that out for you a little more. What we mean is this, and then you can do that. But never retreat from it, never sound like you're retreating from it. Okay, quotes should be accurate, short, pithy, and memorable. You want to say memorable things, and so and short is important. But you can string a bunch of short quotes together. So in a press release, you can write in that so and so said this, and then another sentence and another sentence. So you can maybe get 3 or 4 short sentences in one paragraph, and they'll pick the one they like the best. You don't always know which one it's going to be, which one's going to ring their chimes. But you want something that stands out. You want to say strong things. When you put words in the mouth of your characters, you want to give them strong and interesting things to say, so that it is interesting and worthy of being quoted. So that's where you say, this is outrageous, or you have some soundbite of interest that way. Then, for a press release to be effective, you need to follow it up with phone calls. And the way you do that is, after you send your press release out in the morning, maybe you wait a half hour, and you start picking up the phone. You have your press list that you've used to send the press release to, and you put the press list in the BCC line, the blind carbon copy, because everybody doesn't want to see all the list of all the media you send it to. So you send one copy to yourself and the BCC to everybody else, everybody who's on your press list. All right, so then you have this press list, and you also have phone numbers. So you want to do research and build a press list. Now, I can provide you with the press list that I'm using for this billboard publicity. I can provide you with that, and that can get you started, and you can kind of go through it. But you got to keep it up to date, because people change jobs and things like that. So you need to go online from time to time to these various publications, and you need to look up who's working for them and what their beats are. And you want to send the right press release to the right reporter. Don't waste other reporters' time with your story if your story is not relevant to the beat they do. For example, you don't send your atheist press release to the flower show reporter unless you're running an atheist flower show, all right? So keep that in mind, that focus on the reporters who you really want. Not every story is suitable for a religion reporter. Not every story is suitable for a news reporter. It might just be a religion reporter or a feature reporter story. So you get the stories to the reporters who need to see them. Sometimes it's both. But don't just say, oh, I know this reporter, but I don't know what they do, I'll send them my press release. Don't do that unless they ask you to. If they say, oh, send me all your press releases. Some reporters will do that, but most of the time they won't. Okay, so you send your press release to the right reporters. Then you have their phone numbers, because you collect this with the information you collect on their email address. So then you pick up the phone and you call them. And here's what you don't say. You don't say, "Did you get my press release?" They hate that. Okay, that puts them on a spot. Maybe they haven't read their press releases yet. Maybe they put your press release in the trash because it didn't interest them. Whatever. They'll fish it back out of the trash, or they'll tell you to send it to them. Or they'll say, "Oh, I didn't get that. Why don't you send it to me?" And you say, "Okay, I'll send it to you again." But you don't ask them if they got it. Instead, you say, you might start out with some statement, very short statement about your subject. Say, "Did you know this is happening?" And then you say, "I'm so-and-so with such and such group, and I'm just following up on a press release I sent you this morning in case you have any questions or want more information." See, you're not asking if they got it. You're telling them, you're just assuming they got it. And you're just saying, "I'm just following up in case you want to know more." That's your whole point. And after you say that brief little blurb, you shut up and listen, because they don't want to be monopolized by you. They may be really busy. They'll view you like a telephone solicitor, and they want to get rid of you. Let them get rid of you if that's what they're trying to do. They will appreciate the fact that you respect their time. So keep that first blurb short. Get your basic point across, who you are, that you're following up on the press release. And then I always read the headline on the press release that I sent them. "I'm just following up on a press release I sent you this morning with the headline." And then I read the headline. And they'll go, "Oh, I saw that," or "I remember that. Yeah, we're going to do this," or "No, that isn't the story we do." Whatever. Once you said your little blurb, you leave a quiet space and let them respond. And if they want to get rid of you, yes, let them get rid of you. If they don't want to get rid of you, if they ask you anything, if they say anything other than goodbye, engage them. But again, engage them by saying something else brief and to the point, and then pausing again. And keep it going like that, so that you bring them in. Don't monopolize, don't give a monologue, engage them in actual dialogue. So they may say, "Well, that really isn't the kind of story we cover." And sometimes they'll go further and say, "The kind of thing we cover is this. So if you're ever having anything on that, please send us a press release." Write that down and keep that information with your press list. That fleshes out your press list, so you know what to send these reporters and what not to send. That way you don't burden them with the wrong stuff, and you're sure to get them the right stuff. And if they don't offer that, if they just say, "Well, we're just not going to use that story, it just doesn't suit us," then say, you can still make a parting shot by saying, "Well, if you're ever doing anything on," and then you say the kind of stuff your organization does. "If you're ever doing anything on that, feel free to give us a call. We're available to you as a resource." They appreciate that. They like that. And then let them go. But what may happen, and you need to be ready for this, is you get to talking with this reporter, and they start asking you more questions and more questions, and you start hearing click, 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 that they're typing. They're writing the story now, and you're being interviewed by a reporter. And you just were making a follow-up call just to see if you could answer a few questions, and next thing you know, you're in the middle of an interview. And that can happen. And you need to be ready to think on your feet, because anything you say may be used. So think about what you say, and and I'll cover later in this seminar the way to be prepared for that. But the main thing is, it can happen. These things can morph right into the interview, where they'll say, "Oh, can I turn on my recording device, and can I get a statement from you?" Well, whatever. That's radio. If you're calling up a radio reporter, because you follow up not just on newspapers, but TV and radio too. Now, you're selective. You don't have to call everybody on your press list. You pick the ones that are hot prospects. Also, too, if you actually get a live person and not a voicemail at a given publication, then don't call anybody else at that publication. You got your actual contact. Don't call every reporter that you might have sent it to at that newspaper. Yes?
How do they know that you're you? if you call a reporter
Mhm.
and you find yourself being interviewed
Mhm.
because something, how do they know who they're talking to?
Well, the fact that you acknowledge that you sent this press release, how would, you know that if you weren't you? If you're following up on a press release and you rattle off the title of the press release, the only person who would know that was whoever sent the press release. So that they're not likely, it would take some real conniving for you to pull a fast one to where someone else sends a press release and then you call up and pretend to be somebody else.
Which could be very discrediting for the reporter.
It could. And sometimes they will call you back, they want your number, and they usually, if they're interviewing you, they expect a call back. And you need to be able to answer the phone in the appropriate way. Now, in my case, I always answer my phone with, the reference to the organization and my title, so that they always know they've gotten me and not just somebody. Now, chances with volunteer organizations, that's not as easy. You can use your home phone or whatever and say, oh, that's my husband, okay, I'll go get him. I mean, that's the way it happens in real life with most volunteer organizations, but they understand that. And in a way, that's real to them too. So, it's...
That's calling me back, so I'm gonna go.
Oh, good. Anyway, I have not run into a problem of people doubting that I'm me. And so long as I've never given anyone reason to doubt, then I've never run into.
Oh, that wasn't my question.
Yes, just from their standpoint.
I'm thinking of the reporter
Yeah, the
publishing
fact
the
checking.
paper, and it could have been anybody.
Right. No, I don't think so. If it's print, they might want a photograph of you, and then they also probably do some checking on you that you don't know that they're doing,
Yeah.
and so on. Okay. Now, but the idea here is ultimately to form relationship with reporters, form a relationship. That way, as you get to know these reporters on a personal basis, then you can get them the right kind of stories, and you have a better chance of your story hitting and sticking. All right. Oh yeah, one more thing. You're helping them do their job. You have to remember that they need to publish stories, and they need to publish interesting stories. It's part of their job. So if you can help them do their job, they're going to like you. So it's where your interests and theirs intersect that becomes the point where they're helping you. They're not in business to help you, and you don't exist just to help them. But if you help them in a way that also helps you, everybody wins, and that's what you want to create. It's that kind of win-win situation. All right, any questions on this? All right, now I'm going to go just a little bit into press conferences. Just as you're going to write more letters to the editor than you would write press releases, you're going to write more press releases than you're going to hold press conferences. There's a very, very few things a press conference worth. Yes.
Can you wait till Hall comes back, because she's kind of like.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, how many, okay, so while we're waiting on her,
Yeah.
how many phone calls would you make on a average press release?
Depending on the size of the media market, I might make, a dozen phone calls or more, somewhere in there. Yeah. You just got to keep picking up the phone and keep dialing. And most of the time you get a voicemail or you get the wrong person, and sometimes they'll say, well, that person doesn't work here anymore, and that's also a way to revise your press list and bring it up to date. And then you can say, oh, well, who does handle that beat now? And then get an email address for them and send the press release again. And so this is another way phone calls help you. It helps you keep your list up to date. All right, why don't I hand out the handout? I'll give her one too on this, and then I'll cover the rest of the material in it. But this one.
We have to promise not to read the thought about press conference.
No, it's all right. Go ahead and open to the part on press conferences. Yeah, but we're going to wait till she gets back. So go ahead and just look that over and see if that causes you to have any questions about press conferences. there's a sample media advisory that's provided. This is the material on press conference that starts on page 2.
It's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, it's really just brief notes to help remind you of what we're talking about here.
I like the last thing on here about having one reporter because they like exclusives.
Yeah. Yes, okay. Was that about the billboard?
Yeah,
What?
it's not up yet.
It's not up yet.
No.
Okay. All right, well, we can strategize about that a little later then.
Okay.
All right, we started talking about press conferences, and I put the handout on your desk there. And the press conference starts on page 2 in that handout.
I can see it now. Noel returns.
Anyway, so now with a press
You
conference,
have to be a little more shocking than that. She returns from the dead.
anyway, if you send out a media advisory, that's where you don't tell all the stuff that you're going to tell at your press conference. The media advisory lets the press know that you're going to have this important press conference, but you don't reveal everything. You tantalize them. Or if you do reveal some of it, you embargo it, which you use the word embargoed until such and such date and time, which means nobody can publish anything on that subject that you put in this press release or this media advisory until that date arrives, but you can't break an embargo date. Now, and the media will not break an embargo date because they know that if they do, then they won't get any more interesting press releases from you, or you won't give them advance notice on stories that might be breaking. So they're going to honor that. They may call you up and ask for permission to break the embargo, but you usually don't want to grant that. There's a reason why you pick an embargo. There's a reason why you want everything to happen at once. You want to be in control of your story. So don't get so excited if someone from the media calls you up and says, well, can I do that story now? And you think, oh, I got a hit. Somebody wants to do the story. I'll give it to them now. It could blow the whole thing because you want to get as much media as you can. And so you don't necessarily say yes to every reporter who wants something. If you have a planned media campaign, you follow your plan. Now, when the American Humanist Association launched its bus ad campaign last year, we were going to hold a press conference following morning after we sent the media advisory. And so we weren't revealing what the slogan was going to be on the bus sign. So you had to come to the press conference to find out. And so that was the lure. But the 11 o'clock news that night, they called up the bus advertising company that we contracted with, and they got the slogan from them. We didn't think that anybody'd do that because investigative reporting is something that very few media actually do. Okay, so we didn't think ahead on that and didn't tell them mum's the word on this. So they actually leaked our story on the 11 o'clock news the night before, but it really didn't hurt our press conference the next day. We did get a nice turnout, cameras there and reporters and stuff, and it went very well. But now when you hold a press conference, you still send out a press release to all the other people who didn't come to it and say pretty much all the same stuff that you said at the press conference, but they didn't get the advantage of the visuals or the face-to-face interviews. But still, you want everybody to have the story, so you're still going to send out a press release. As soon as your press conference starts, the press release goes out and says, at a press conference today, this was announced and blah, blah, blah. At the press conference, you have press packets in which you have little information about your organization, in which you have the text of the speeches that everybody gives at the press conference, no more than 4 speakers and no more than 5 minutes apiece. So make sure your people stick within that limit and that the full text of their remarks is going to be in the press packet. And that they pretty much stick to that. They can ad-lib a little bit on the side, but pretty much stick to that. But really, a press conference to be effective needs to have some visuals, something they have to come and take a picture of. And that's where, when you get to talking about visuals, then you need to think about now the publicity stunt. The publicity stunt takes us one notch higher than the press conference. Press conference you need to hold in some centrally located place in the city that's near wherever the media tend to cluster. But your your publicity stunt sometimes can be almost anywhere. There's a kind of a rule on publicity stunts. They really have to stand out. They really have to be interesting. There was this guy I knew who was the head of a Hispanic unity organization. Now you may think that Hispanics all get along with each other, but they don't. You know, so you got Mexicans and Argentinians and Costa Ricans and all these others, and Colombians and so on, and they don't all get along with each other. So he headed this Hispanic unity organization, and he wanted to do a big splash publicity study. He was having a unity conference, and he wanted to get the media out for it. And this was right after there had been that Hands Across America thing, where people were going to hold hands from coast to coast and bring world peace. Okay, well, it didn't work, but in any case, it was well known. So he had everyone from the hotel that was attending this conference come outdoors at the end of the conference and do hands around the hotel to show Hispanic unity, okay? And he got it all cleared with the people that they were going to do this at an appointed time. And then he sent out his media advisory to the press to say, okay, this is what's going to happen at this particular time because this is what it's about, this Hispanic unity. And they had helicopters out there, they had cameras, getting aerial views, and reporters interviewing people doing this hands around the hotel. Dumbest idea you ever heard of. I asked him, I said, what is the secret of an effective publicity stunt? And he says, if you are embarrassed to tell your friends and relatives about it. So that's how you know you've got a good one. And some years ago, when Paul Kurtz was doing these Friday the 13th soirees, putting on these things where you have a big party on a Friday the 13th and you'll walk under ladders and have black cats cross your path and you break mirrors and do all this stuff. I said to Paul, I said, you know, this stuff's ridiculous. I mean, nobody really believes this stuff, so why are you going to all the trouble to debunk it? And he said, because it's really one of the few things the media will cover that we do. We do something of great substance and seriousness and they don't come out. But they'll come out for this. Well, that, again, it lets people know, hey, we're over here. It lets people find you. Then they can come to your meeting and hear the serious stuff. But they first have to have their attention captured. And doing this goofy stuff tends to get attention. Yes.
Has there been any stunts around the billboards? Any Santas climbing the pole? I mean, anything?
No, I have not done any publicity stunts. Sometimes the media wants to get a bunch of the people out to pose in front of the billboard who are associated with it. Sometimes that works pretty well. But that's it. We have not done publicity stunts about it or staged mock protests. In fact, there was, on one case, there was some kind of drama group that was going to stage a mock protest. I think it was a Chicago billboard. And I said, you got to be very careful about that. You got to make sure it's clear that it's a mock protest and that you're not deceiving anybody or trying to create a news story by creating a phony protest around it. The media won't like that very much. So now if this group wants to do that on their own, fine, but maybe you want to disassociate yourself from the group that was planning to do this. It was an independent kind of drama group. Well, in the end, nothing ever came of it. They never decided to go forward with it. But you have to be careful to make sure that you don't hurt your credibility. All right, so, but the main thing is publicity stunt needs to be quirky, it needs to be interesting, needs to stand out. That's the whole idea behind a publicity stunt. One thing that some of the student groups do is they will hold a soul auction. And I always tell them, don't just call it a soul auction, because that almost sounds like something with soul music or whatever. What they're doing is they're selling their soul to the highest bidder, and what they'll do is they'll go to whatever the church is that wants to buy their soul, and they'll sit and attend so many hours of services, or they'll put up with so many hours of being preached at. They'll give the people a chance to proselytize to them. And so on some of the college campuses they do that. They do this selling their souls to whatever churches, because it's kind of based on what Hemant Mehta did, and he later wrote a book about it called How I Sold My Soul on eBay. And he offered his soul to the highest bidder, and what he meant by soul was just that he would give a certain amount of his time and let them, use him however way they would to, to get his views on things or to proselytize him or whatever. And it made quite a story. So these are kinds of things that are interesting. Some people do goofier things. They'll have debaptisms, and where they use a hairdryer. Okay, so so these are kind of goofy party things to do, and you can get some attention for it. Some people don't like them. They say that it's mocking religion, so maybe you don't want to do religion mocking ones. Whatever you pick, it just needs to be really interesting and stand out, and then give you a chance, a soapbox on which you give your real message. But you first have to be noticed. All right, any questions on this? All right, so you've got sample media advisories and sample press releases, and you can see here, humanists speak out about godless billboard in the Phoenix area, so you see how I worked that word godless in there to the headline. Now, yes, I bold-faced it here because this is the version that was handed out at the press conference. We did a press conference for that one. That was when the AHA had its conference in Phoenix, and the Phoenix Coalition of Reason had their billboard at the same time. We tied the two together for a bigger news story, and so it got coverage. It got the conference as well as the billboard coverage, and the local coalition as well as the AHA. So that was a good thing. If you can add more than one element to your story, you increase the odds that it's going to be covered. All right, does anyone need to take a break right now? And then we go to the next part. You want to take a break? All right. Side of the buses, because the buses we're going to be taking visitors to the state fair, and deliberately picked a route that took people to the state fair. And a bunch of people complained to the bus company, and the bus company took the bus signs down. So we had our lawyers call the bus company, and they came, and they put the signs back up. So we got 3 rounds of publicity on that. When they first went up, when they came down, and when they went back up. I mean, triple whammy. It was wonderful. I mean, you can't buy that kind of advertising. It's just, it was fabulous. So that's what you want to do. You want to stir up interest so that maybe you get a little pushback, so long as it isn't too heavy. All right, now this handout, I'm going to give to you actually in advance because it's a worksheet, and we're going to follow along on it. Now you're not going to fill out the worksheet because what you want to do is you want to keep this and make photocopies of it, because this is the kind of worksheet you're going to want to fill out on a regular basis every time you do a media campaign. And this applies to the media campaign as a whole, not just appearing in person on television or radio, although it has a strong connection to that. But really what we're doing here is we're getting clear about why we're doing what we're doing, what our point is, what our message is. Now the message that we're trying to clarify here isn't the message of your organization as a whole. What we're trying to clarify here is the message of your particular campaign, your particular media campaign. If you're launching some initiative of some sort, that you're concerned about some social issue, or whatever it might be, then this is where you try to get it clear. What is the point you're trying to get across? What is your message? So you write down some brief version of your message after that first question. What exactly is your message, the main idea you're trying to get across? That's on the first page. Now, once you have some idea of what you're trying to get across, then you flesh it out. Does your message involve a who? Is there some important person involved or some individual? Is it about a person? If so, you put the who in there. Is it about some event? Is it about something happening or whatever? You put the what. Is there some special reason why you're doing it? You put the why. If there's some special place where this is taking place, is this an event that you want to get people to come to? Then you got to put the where and the when. And if there's something about the way you're doing it, then there may be a how. So you want to kind of now flesh your message out so you get the idea of all the different ways it answers the basic news questions, because people who are going to write about your issue, they need to know all of those things, or as many of those things as you can relate your story to. These are the typical reporter questions. Now, it's one thing to have a message, but it's another thing to have a message that's relevant. And one thing that makes a message relevant, particularly for people like us, is that there's some problem that our message seeks to solve or resolve. Just because you have a message doesn't necessarily make it interesting. Some people are likely at some point to ask you, well, why should I care? Why should I care about your message? And one of the reasons they would care is because there's a problem out there. There's some trouble and you're trying to solve it. Like, for example, if you say your message is to reduce global overpopulation. All right, well, why? Well, because overpopulation is a bad thing and it's causing all of these problems. You see, so you have to show that it's a problem and that your message is to solve that problem. All right, now if your message is going to solve the problem, then what benefits does your message offer, or what results does it promise? So if we all do what you suggest and reduce the global population, what will be the benefits? You need to be able to put the benefits down. So whatever it is that your campaign is about, or if it's just to get more people to be humanists or atheists or whatever, you need to put your message down as to why. What are the benefits of more people thinking like us? Is the world going to be any better? Are they going to be happier? What's the benefit? You need to be able to explain that. Otherwise, the reporter is just going to ask, well, why should I care? What's the point? Okay, so you're doing this. Why? Who cares? And that leads to the question on the top of page 2. What is unique about your message? Let's say you've decided that you're going to launch a program to feed the homeless. All right, well, that's nice. What's unique about you doing it? What, just because you do it godlessly and other people do it in a godly way? I mean, is that your whole story? You know, you need to really think about this as to what angle. If there's some other angle you can bring into there, something unique about it, maybe the way you do it. Like, we help the homeless in a way that makes them less dependent. We promote independence. We want to end the cycle of homelessness, so we're not just giving them a fish, we're teaching them to fish. That kind of thing. So that you point out that there's something about the fact that we're humanists, that we're not interested in just keeping people dependent. We're interested in breaking the cycle and solving the social problem, and making the spiral go the other way instead of the spiral downward. All right, now, a lot of people wonder about this next one. What are some really stupid objections to your message? You may think you don't need to prepare for stupid objections. But in fact, stupid objections can throw you off. If you're not familiar with the ridiculous arguments that people raise on the other side, you can get blindsided by them and not come prepared with an easy to roll off the tongue answer. A lot of scientists made this mistake when they debated creationists. They didn't realize the kind of stuff that creationists were going to throw at them. They were going to say all sorts of goofy things like, well, look, all the radiometric time clocks that show the Earth to be very old were all reset by the vapor canopy when it broke up and caused a worldwide flood. And there was this vapor canopy over the Earth, and there was this massive flood, and all of the radiometric time clocks got reset. So therefore, all that evidence is unreliable. Well, of course that's goofy and ridiculous, but if you've never heard that before, you don't know how to answer that. You don't even know what they're talking about. Or they have things, creationists have things that roll off the tongue nicely. They say, well, the Grand Canyon could have been built by a little bit of water over a long period of time, or it could have been built by a lot of water over a short period of time. In other words, a worldwide flood. Okay, really stupid. But what do you say to that if you're hearing it for the first time?
That's really stupid.
Yeah, well, but after you say that, they'll say, why is that stupid? Makes sense to me, somebody might say. Seems logical. And so then you have to be prepared to explain, well, actually, some of these stratified layers show long dry periods, and others show the evidence of raindrops, but
The great unconformity.
yeah, well, and they show footprints. So what were these people doing? Treading water, leaving their footprints while the floodwaters were rising? This makes no sense. So anyway, you can just, there's lots of things you can say to answer that, but you have to be prepared. Also, sometimes talk show hosts will, on a radio or TV talk show, will throw you a ringer. They'll deliberately ask you a goofy question just to catch you off guard. This happened to Lori Lippman Brown. She was on a TV show, and she was all ready to talk about the fact that atheists need more representation in Congress, and that our issues are important and church-state separation is important. She's all geared up and her mind's all oriented to that. And how atheists have rights too. And the first question out of the talk show host's mouth was, well, if you don't believe in a God, what do you say to people when they sneeze? That's what she got hit with. And it kind of caught her off guard because her mind wasn't oriented to a question so off the wall and ridiculous. I mean, she knows her answer now. You know, it'd say, do you need a tissue? It's a very, very humanistic answer. But if you're caught by that and you're not even oriented to that, so you need to be loose and flexible. That's why you need to be relaxed when you're on TV. So like in an ordinary conversation, somebody throws something goofy at you, you need to be ready with a response. Happened to me, I was on this talk show and I happened to be giving some of the standard arguments as to why answered prayer makes no sense. Because if God is all-knowing and all-wise, and all-powerful, why would he be taking advice from us? And why would he change his divine plan just because somebody petitions him? That's what people do, but God doesn't take votes, and we as mere creation and our mere peons, how can we get him to change the whole plan? Is God vacillating? Is God unsure what he knows to do? He needs to check with us, and we can change his mind? That's ridiculous. So then I get this call. It was a call-in talk show. So we get this call from a woman. She says, look, forget all your silly arguments. I know prayer works because I prayed to God for a refrigerator and God gave me a refrigerator. That's what she said. Now, you don't expect anybody to say that. And she was serious. The talk show host and I were looking at each other because he was kind of on my side. We looked at each other like, what do you say to that? So
did he leave the return address?
Yeah, so
was it on the box?
Well, see, this is what I decided to do, is to probe a little bit. Ask her a little bit more about, well, now how did this prayer get answered? Did the refrigerator just materialize in your kitchen? I mean, how did that happen? Well, then she began to tell the story about how she'd lost her job and she was out of money, and she let everybody at her church know that she needed a new refrigerator, and she prayed real hard, and then one day some members of her church had pitched in their money and they brought her a refrigerator and delivered it to her house. I said, ma'am, I think I have a naturalistic explanation for how you got your refrigerator. So, people say bizarre, off-the-wall things, and you need to be ready to deal with them. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You certainly can't expect things like that, and you can't write down these stupid objections when you don't know what's coming.
No, some of them it's true, so off the wall that you just have to be flexible and ready for stupid things. But other ones, you can know if you're dealing with a certain issue. For example, if you're dealing with overpopulation, there are people who say there's no population problem. There are people who say we don't have enough people on the planet. They do, and they have websites, and you can read their stuff. And what they do is they do a calculation of all of the space on planet Earth, and then they do a calculation of all the world's people, and then if you evenly distributed all the world's people over all the space on the Earth, everybody'd have like 10 acres. Okay? So there's plenty of room. See, this is one of their arguments. Now, who would have thunk it? Okay, but if you're going to talk about overpopulation, you better be ready for that stuff. You better be reading some of the real goofy pseudoscientists out there. If you're talking about global warming or anything else, be ready for the really goofy stuff.
I'm going to Katie, I'm going to Antarctica.
Now,
So, let me ask you
Oh,
a
I get 20
question.
of them there.
Can you give us some typical questions that people have gotten in the past about these billboards? Because, I mean, that's one thing that I have concern about.
yes, and it's the stupidest one actually came to me in a phone call. A guy actually got my number and called me up. Well, I had a nice long conversation with him and I got him straightened out. But he told me, the billboard that you guys are using, he said that billboard is anti-Catholic. And I asked him, I said, how do you figure? I actually knew the answer to the question because I know where this comes from. But he was saying, well, look, we Catholics, we believe in God. And you're suggesting that God does not exist, and we Catholics are tired of all of these attacks on our God. And I said, look, Catholicism isn't the only religion with God, and all of the religions have as their God's name, God. And he said, well, no, because he says the Muslims, their God's name is Allah. And I said, no, Allah is just Arabic for God. And he said, no, well, you didn't put Allah on your billboard. And I said, when the Muslims advertised in San Francisco with bus signs, they did not say Allah. They said God. They said honor God. And he said, they did? And I said, yes. Because the name of their God is God, and the name of your God is God, and the name of the Jewish God is God. I said, okay, but we're not talking about your guy, okay? We're talking about everybody's guy, okay? It includes your guy, but we're just saying we don't believe in any of them. But we're not singling you out. It's not about you, okay? And I very painstakingly explained it to him. And he ended the conversation by saying, well, I feel very relieved now. And I put his mind to rest. But you see, I'd read somewhere why it was that people react when we say God. Because when we humanists and atheists say God, we're just talking about a generic philosophical concept or a theological idea. We're talking about a supreme being, a deity, okay? But other people, I had to read this to realize that. I had to learn this, that when they see the word God, they see their God, okay? It's personal. They see it differently than we do. And so that's one of the things. So you hear it, and it sounds really stupid, and you might answer it wrong if you didn't know that simple issue. But the usual one too is they just think the mere fact that we acknowledge that we don't believe and that we're looking for other people who don't believe, they still feel there's something wrong with that. And so I then point out and I say, well, I know exactly what's wrong. First, you have a problem with the fact that we even exist. People like us aren't supposed to exist. We're not supposed to have ideas like this. But if we do have ideas like this, you would like us to keep quiet about them. And many letters to the editor say, look, you guys can have your beliefs, it's a free country, but just don't talk about it. And I have a ready response to that. It says, we don't accept, don't ask, don't tell as applying to our views. You have the freedom to express your views. We have the freedom to express ours. Nothing wrong with ours. We don't say that you can't express yours unless it's on the courthouse, lawn. And so we have the same right. And then the third thing that scares them, of course, is that we're getting organized. And that we're working together in these coalitions. Well, that's kind of scary. Well, hey, you guys get organized. And the fourth one, the one that we don't really do, that they're so afraid that we'll do, is proselytize. And I just say, well, we don't waste our time with it. And 2 sentences on a billboard aren't going to change anybody's religion anyway. You'd have to be a pretty weak state for that to change your religion. So I make a little joke out of that. But also, I say that proselytizing isn't a very effective use of our time, but if it were, we would have just as much right to do it as you. Why can't we go knocking on doors if we want to? You can do it. Why shouldn't we have exactly the same freedom as everybody else to promote our ideas? So you use that as an opportunity, but that's a common objection.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
And go right ahead.
And be, the first thing I noticed when I read the message on our billboard was that we capitalized the letter G.
Yes.
And that we capitalized everything as well. And I think that might be something somebody will say.
They do. They do. That is another one of those stupid objections. They say, well, if you don't believe in God, why do you capitalize it?
Yeah.
Because it's a proper noun. Hello, I capitalize Superman. All right, and I don't believe there's a Superman. It's a fictional character.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, capitalize it. And of course, anytime we lowercase it, like if we say a God, and then you can lowercase it when you do it that way because you're speaking of it generically, then people say, oh, you're trying to diminish our God. And then I just say no, and then we're just not using it as a proper noun. We're speaking of the concept generically. So you have to calmly and in a friendly way, painstakingly explain these things to people because they come up with these reactions. And you need to be ready. So the easiest thing to do is wherever one of these billboards has appeared somewhere else, you can go to unitedcore.org, and we have the list of all 20 of our coalitions. You can click on any of them. And any of them that have used a particular billboard with this wording, they've gotten various stories in the media, okay? And so you pick maybe the leading newspaper story they got, and you click on that. And then, well, I always encourage people to put the links to the news coverage they get, because it's a nice thing to be proud of. You know, look, we're the ones you read about in these different papers. But it's also, few people like to follow through and read the articles. So you click through and you go to the article, and then you scroll down and you look at the comments below the article. And this is where people say all those stupid things.
I waste hours reading them just to be prepared.
Yeah, just have fun, you know, and think about how you might respond to some of this. Because any of the stupid things, that's where they're going to show up.
The other question I had for you was, you know, this billboard is going up around the holidays.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that there will be some people that say, well, you're just trying to diminish the holidays or take away from our, you know, celebration.
Yeah, and we would point out that our billboards do not have a holiday theme. The ones, the bus signs that the American Humanist Association is using right now, they do have a holiday theme. And hey, it's our holiday too. But you don't have to make the argument it's our holiday too, because this billboard is not holiday themed. So you say two things. You say it is not holiday themed, and then they say, okay, well then why is it being put up now? And you say, these billboards have been going up around the country all through the year. And
It's just our turn.
so finally got to Houston, that's all.
Yeah, it's just our turn.
You know, it's our turn, and this is when we fit into the schedule. And 20 coalitions have been running these billboards in the country right now, and there'll be more next year, and it's just going to keep on going. It was last month and the month before, and it'll be next month and the month after. So that's all. It just happens to fall in December. We're just not going to stop in December. I mean, why? So.
Good answer.
Good answer.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what are some really intelligent objections to your message? Need to be ready for the best arguments of the opposition. So if you're doing a particular media campaign on a particular issue, familiarize yourself with what the intelligent opponents are saying. One reason for this is because, like, if you get on a radio talk show, there's a tendency when they put people like us on these shows, they like to put us opposite somebody from the other side.
Of course.
When they put the other side on, they get to do it alone, but, you know, they don't call us up and come on and, oh, we got a fundamentalist on, we need you to, you know, offer an alternative. No, the evangelist comes to town, he gets his own airtime. But when we do it, sometimes they want to counterbalance us. All right, so that, you may get somebody really smart that you got to debate in this situation, so it's useful to know the best argument. Or the talk show host may have boned up on it, may have actually read about these things, or the reporter may be knowledgeable in this area. Religion reporters are very knowledgeable in these areas. They know the better arguments. And I've had some interesting, lengthy discussions with religion page editors, some of whom were very religious, and some of them weren't hardly religious at all. But it was their beat, and it's what they like to do. It's a subject that interests them. But they will ask sometimes pretty good questions. And they're up on the latest in theology and other discussions in these areas. And so they might ask, well, what do you think of Richard Dawkins, or, you know, things like that. And don't you feel that they're just bashing religion? And you need to be ready with these kinds of, you know, to deal with these kinds of questions and answer them in the way you think is suitable for your group, the kind of answer you're trying to give to them. But just, and someone may have some particularly clever sounding argument about the idea that you're dealing with, and you need to be prepared. So just kind of bone up on the best arguments on the other side.
Can you call me back?
And then, after you've gone through all of this, all of these questions we have here, now you want to restate your message briefly. We've got all of this stuff we've fed into it. Now, can you restate your message briefly again and keep it simple? And once you've restated your message and kept it simple, then there's another thing to do, and this is sometimes harder for us. Restate your message in positive terms. We're so used to saying what we disagree with, what we don't believe, what isn't so. Is there a way we can say what is so? Because oftentimes we tend to think of the traditional Christian message as being a positive message. And I don't think it is at all. I think it's inherently a negative message, but they don't usually couch it that way. I think the basic message is, if you don't believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, to hell with you. That's the message, okay? But they have all kinds of positive ways of doing it. My wife and I, we were driving by a church and we saw this one marquee and it said on the front, "Free trip to heaven, details inside." Now that was cute and a nice positive tone. Well, first of all, it isn't free, all right? So when you get done with all of the pledging or tithing or whatever, and there isn't any trip. So the whole thing's a lie. But they have a positive way of putting it. Oh, that Jesus will solve your problems and you get to live forever. Isn't it going to be wonderful? So we can have positive messages. Is there a positive way that we can put whatever it is we're trying to say? And even the billboard has its positive message. It's, you aren't alone. Even though it's worded in the negative, aren't, and don't believe in God, nonetheless, the positive point being made is there's a place for you. If you're like us, there's a place for you, and you can couch the positive whenever you talk about it on the air or to reporters and so on and say it's really reaching out to our own people. And you can also point out that that the reactions we tend to get on the whole are positive. We get more positive reactions wherever we do these billboards. We get more people saying thank you for being there for me, than we get messages of you're going to hell and why don't you go back to Russia, although they don't say that so much anymore, like they used to do during the Cold War. Why don't you guys go back to the Soviet Union where you belong and have your godless communism. Don't get so much that anymore. But mostly positive reactions, and so you can always talk about that. But whatever it is, whatever initiative you're doing with your groups, try to find a way to couch it in positive terms. So if you want to reduce overpopulation, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get rid of people, you're trying to kill off people, is this genocide? You know, people will put these negative connotations on. You say we're trying to make more room, we're trying to give everyone more room. You can put it in a positive term, more room, more space, a better world, more resources for more people, more water, more less pollution, and more clean air, and things like that. That all of the world's environmental problems come back to too many human bodies and consuming. So we want to solve the problems of the environment. So you can put it in a positive way. All right. Now you want to then go to what is the best audience for this message? What's the audience likely to be affected for the better? Now in the case of the billboard, the obvious audience is the people who will benefit by finding out that they're not alone. Any news?
No, that was my husband.
Oh, okay.
He's out of town and I can't call him, he can only call me.
Oh, okay. All right, so you ask what is the best audience for this message, and in the case of the billboard, the primary audience is the people we're trying to let know, who are already like us, let them know that they're not alone, that there's places for them. But there's a secondary message. There is another audience for that message that will also be improved for the better. And that's the general public who will start to realize we're here. We exist. Like the gay rights movement did, you know, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. Okay, so we're here, and so we're your friends, we're your neighbors, we're your co-workers. Some of us may even be sitting next to you in the pew in church because a lot of people just go to church for other reasons. And so we're out there, we're members of your family, get used to us. We want a place at the table and we are going to assert ourselves now. And so understand that we have the same kind of feelings you do, we're very much like you, and we exist. We're part of the community. That's the secondary message. That's the message of general tolerance and free speech and all of that. It's not so much it's going to make people come around to our view, but maybe they'll treat us a little better when they realize that we do exist and we deserve a place at the table. It'll certainly start to break that down. We hope to get to the day when it's no longer newsworthy that somebody doesn't believe in God. That it's no longer newsworthy that somebody puts a billboard up and asks the question that we put up. It's newsworthy right now. We're in a sweet spot right now. We're not so far beyond the pale that they won't give us coverage at all, and we're not so passé that they don't want to bother with us because we're so well accepted in society. We're in that middle sweet spot right now. And you can think of a lot of other groups that have passed through this. Interracial marriage used to be enough to get you airtime. Now an interracial couple being an interracial couple won't get you airtime. Being a transsexual would get you airtime, just to talk about that. Now it won't. Being gay was controversial at one time. Just talking about it, just coming out of the closet was a big deal. Now it's not such a big deal. A lot of things go through those stages. So we're in that stage now where we're controversial, just because we exist. So we exploit that to let more people know that we exist. We play on that. We get the media to cover us until everyone gets used to us, and then we got to come up with something else to talk about. But we can hit with this now because it's big now. Well, with the books of Dawkins and Hitchens and all of those making the new atheism popular, it's now all the rage. It's something to talk about. So we catch this wave while it's cresting, and we ride it all the way into the beach on our surfboard, because it won't come again. So let's play it while it's here, and then you play other themes at other times. And if some people think, well, it's negative to play the atheism card, well, not really. It's just seizing an opportunity, because you play the card, and then when you got their attention, you give whatever your message of your group really is in a more full form. And we find that we can usually turn these billboards to that positive purpose relatively easily. That the press release talks about that. That we want to find our own, when people get together, they can do better work in society together, we can do more charitable work together, whatever. So there's a benefit to coming together, there's a benefit to people finding us, and there's a benefit to social tolerance. Okay, so when you have decided what's the best audience for the message, the one likely to be affected for the better, what's the best media for reaching that audience? Where does that audience go? Well, this audience probably doesn't go to your nearby fundamentalist church, so you're probably not going to want to have a debate or something in that venue. But maybe they go to a lot of the colleges and universities, or maybe they listen to certain radio shows, or maybe they watch PBS television or whatever. If there's any way that you can find this audience, or maybe a lot of them are in UU churches, wherever this audience goes, that's where you need to go reach them. And then when you figured out where that audience goes, then who are the best spokespeople for representing your message? And there are different ways of representing your message. You can represent on TV, you can represent on radio, so you want people with a good voice on radio. You want people who look good on camera. You want, if you're doing it in a lecture, you want people who can do an in-depth lecture on a subject and not sound superficial and all that. So you pick the right people for the right aspects of your message, and different people become the spokespeople at different times. And then, what are your qualifications or experiences that make you a suitable spokesperson? So if you're filling this out because you are the person who will be representing the group, then what's so special about you? Because the reporter is going to want to know. They may not ask in so many words what's so special about you, but it's going to kind of come up. What is your authority? What's your credential? Why did they choose you? They're not going to say it quite that way, but in one way or another, that'll work its way into the conversation. So you need to have a clear idea of who you are and why you are in the position you're in, why you're the best representative. Any questions on that? Okay. All right.
We should talk about that.
Only
Yeah.
handling hostile questions.
Yeah, we really hadn't discussed who was going to be that spokesperson for each of those different venues, so.
Yeah, and it might be one person might do a bunch of the venues. It doesn't have to be a whole bunch of different people, but you can spread it around a little if you want.
Noel.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to give you another one, because this is going to help you actually plan your media appearance itself. This one was just to plan your message up, that if you're really clear what your message is, then when you go on, you know what you're talking about. So you don't get caught flat-footed or by surprise, because you've done your thinking and preparation. You're not just, oh boy, I get to be on TV. But you have a message, and that you're there to get that message out. So now you've clarified what your message is. You got a good idea of how you can, stretch it out and then shrink it back and put it in positive terms and all of that. So now the rubber hits the road. Now you're going to go on a radio talk show, a TV show, or you're going to be talking to a newscaster or a print reporter, because a lot of these things that come up, they apply to print reporting too. That when you're being interviewed by a reporter and they're going to publish that interview or the results from it, let's see, I got too much there, then you need to prepare this for that too before talking to a reporter. It's a good idea. Because these are guides that force you to think it through, force you to think the right thoughts so that you prepare yourself. Okay, so what's your private goal for this media appearance or newspaper interview? Why are you doing this? I mean, are you just doing it for ego reasons? Are you doing it because you want to promote your organization, which should really be the reason? What's your goal? Because you can't measure whether you did it well or ill, whether you were successful or not, if you don't have a goal. What are you trying to accomplish here? Usually what you should be trying to accomplish is you want to get the word out about something, or you want to get some ideas into the discourse, or you want to get the name of your organization associated with this issue so that you're the go-to organization on this subject. You need to be clear why you're even bothering to do this, what you intend to accomplish so that you can measure it. Trying to get more hits to your website, you're trying to get more members in your organization, trying to get more people to come to your meetings. What's your goal? How are you going to measure success? All right, once you've figured that out, then who are you? Ties into the question on the earlier worksheet, why are you this good representative? What makes you an appropriate representative? So who the heck are you? Because you need some reason to be. It doesn't have to be in the form of credential. It doesn't have to be in the form of a doctorate degree, but whatever it is, there's something about, okay, you're the head of this, or you have a title with the organization. Sometimes that's all you need. It's just that you have a title with the organization, so that gives you your who. That gives you you're somebody. And why are you here? That is, why are you important, or why is your issue important? So who are you and why are you here? What do you want us to do? What are you trying to accomplish here? These are the kinds of things that come out in the course of an interview. And then finally, how can you be reached? What is the official contact info? Now, as I said before, in this age of the internet, all you really need to do is mention the name of your organization and keep mentioning it over and over again in a way that can be Googled and found. Find different ways of saying the name of your group and Google those ways and find the best way to put the name of your group. Because let's say if your group has a long name, there still may be a couple of words in that name that you can just say as an abbreviated name for your group, and if you Google that, it'll come to your group. So see what gets you to your group. What are the different ways of putting it? Yes?
Is Google still using meta tag crawlers?
Well, you could use those, and that can help as a but like for example, if your group Humanists of Houston, all right, that's pretty easy to remember, Humanists of Houston. But try Googling Humanists Houston and see if it also gets Humanists of Houston. It should, because usually they drop anyway. But yeah, just saying Humanists of Houston is probably fine for that one. But some people have a way of titling their organizations in difficult ways. They'll say, well, we are the humanists, atheists, agnostics, and freethinkers of the greater such and such valley. I mean, I see a lot of groups with names like this. So then they need to find some short way of saying that on television or radio so that people actually remember it, because they're going to get some of the words transposed or whatever. So are there 2 or 3 words in that they can focus on and just use that as the abbreviated verbal form of the name? And even even an abbreviated written form is good.
Heathens covers it all.
Yeah, well, if it can be found that way on Google, humanists, like Houston Heathens, if that would get to you.
Hungry heathens.
Hungry heathens would get to us.
Okay.
But in the old days, before the web, and I would talk to people and advise them on how to be effective when they were on TV and radio. I'd say whenever you go on radio and you're going to talk about your group, there are 3 things you must do in every interview. First thing you must do is give the phone number of the group. If you do nothing else during the whole interview, job 1 is give the phone number.
Frequency of 3 times, too.
The second thing you must do is give the phone number. And the third thing you must do is give
Did you
the
read
phone
that?
number.
Did you read ahead?
Yeah.
No, I'm from radio.
Location.
Yeah. That you can have the most wonderful debate, and you can kick ass and do well in the debate, and then wow, I really rocked in it. And then nobody knows who the heck you were or how to find you afterwards. What good was it?
So
Yeah.
now it's give the website address, give the website
You can
address.
give the URL
Website.
or just name the organization. Just say it in a way that it can be found. You can also give a phone number if you want. That's okay to throw that in. It's okay to mention a URL, but be sure you keep finding ways to mention the organization if the host, him or herself, isn't naming the organization. And some of them are very good about that. They'll
The
say,
Secular Center has a phone number,
Freethought.
if we don't really publish it.
yeah.
They're saying something like 90% of the people are still going to do their own research before calling that number anyway. So you're going back to the URL, and if the number's on the URL, it's fine.
Yeah, we used to have a phone for Church of Freethought, but we got like 1 call a quarter. And I would always ask someone whenever they come, how did you find us? The web, exclusively.
Yeah, sure. We used to list in the phone book, so if we didn't give the number, we'd say, we're in the phone book. And then we'd give the name of our organization. That was another way to do it, to avoid giving the phone number, but who looks up anything in a phone book now? So that's just that doorstop they send you once a year. All right. Then you're going to have 3 main talking points. Now, a talking point is just the basic idea that you're trying to get across as a talking point. And these are kind of like your arguments, but there are also just the main ideas that you're trying to get into the public mind. So figure out what your main talking points are. And in the case of the billboard, for example, your talking points would be that we're trying to attract our own people to ourselves. That we're trying to let the rest of the world know that we're here and that we deserve a place at the table. And then you can say, you can pick any number of possible third things, but one of them is most reactions we've been getting are positive. So these are the kind of things that you can do as your talking point. So you want to have these kinds of things, and there are different ways that you can say them. And one of the ways you can say them is creating interesting sound bites. You can also use sound bites as ways of expressing your philosophy, that you can sum up your ideas in sound bites. What's the basic idea of humanism? What is humanism? Well, it's essentially the idea that you can be good without belief in a God. That's a nice, simple way of explaining humanism without getting into some long, convoluted definition. Or you can say, it's the idea that if it is to be, it is up to me. That there's no cosmic rescue. Another kind of soundbite of some philosophical uses, people say, well, then you're saying basically that it's just us, we're alone in the universe. And say, no, we're not alone in the universe, we have each other. It's a nice quip that you can give, and it has a nice warm feeling about it. But sound bites should feature often bold action words and express feeling. They can be humorous or serious, they can be an analogy, play on a cliche, offer examples, they can relate to pop culture, and they can take the form of rhetorical questions or even go on the offensive. So you can you should come up with a couple of nice sound bites for whatever initiative you're working on, whatever campaign or media effort you're doing.
I really liked the one you said right at the beginning, humanists are mainstream,
Yes,
because that's kind of unexpected, you know?
Yes.
Because we share universal values that all good humans
right,
share.
right, yeah.
I mean, not only that, we're somewhere between 15 and 20% of the population.
Yeah, I haven't got that.
Yeah,
Most people don't know that. Are you suggesting also to put that sound bite into our press releases and?
you can put, yes, in fact, one way you put sound bites in press releases is you put them in the mouths of the people you're quoting. You can create sound bites specifically for them.
I say, and you can quote me on that.
Yeah, so, and that's an easy way you do it. In fact, when you use a sound bite, it really doesn't work as part of an objective report. So it doesn't belong in the basic narrative or text of the press release. It does belong in a quote. So it's, you have somebody say the sound bite. Yeah. So it's always good to have a few sound bites in your back pocket.
Jim said we were mainstream.
Emmanuel said to remember
sure.
that we're 15 to 20% of the population.
Yeah. Be prepared to back up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's your reference for that?
Yeah,
Get a
and you better have it.
It's that
So-
pew, wasn't it?
You can mention the pew and then, but remember, but then again, be prepared for intelligent arguments on the other side. The counter argument to the Pew study is, well, yes, these are people who are not affiliated with organizations. It doesn't mean they don't have beliefs, it just means that they're not part of believing organizations. So then you need other studies to show the percentage of, you know,
Identifying, self-identifying.
Yeah, self-identifying godless people. And you still come up with that there are more of us than there are Jews, there are more of us than there are Sikhs, and many other groups in this country, Hindus and so on, all added together. There's more of us than there are them, but they're organized, they have lobbies and things like that, and we don't. And so this is the thing that we need to do. And it's perfectly legitimate for us to do it because we're so numerous and growing. And that the fundamentalist or evangelical churches are starting to shrink in this country. Their membership levels are going down. They're worried that they're going to die out. You go to their conventions, they've got a doomsday scenario, and it doesn't have to do with Armageddon. It has to do with the collapse of the evangelical movement. They're all worried about it. So, anyway, now let's go to the next page. This is your TV and radio interview reminders, and this is the kind of thing that may be the most helpful to you before you do
So the
any kind of
evangelicals like the Republicans. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so some obvious things: arrive early or at the appointed time if that's early enough. You just don't want to be rushed, and you don't want to rush them, so plan well ahead. And know who you're there to meet. A lot of times you say, oh, you know, you figure everybody knows why you're there. Figure everybody knows that you're there to be interviewed, but they get a lot of guests. Sometimes a radio or TV station has a lot of things going on at once, and the receptionist does not know who you are, and they don't know who is planning to have you on the show, and there's all of these different shows going on, and they don't know who to call or ask. So you can't. You have to be able to name the person you're there to meet, and write this stuff down on a 3x5 card and carry it with you. Bring a copy of your short bio with you, even if you've already sent it ahead to the host. And this is also true if you're doing public speaking and someone's going to introduce you and you supply them with your bio, and then they'll get there and they'll say, oh, I left it at home, whatever. So have another copy with you. About 1/3 of the time you're going to have to give it to them. So, and have some literature on your group wherever you go, whenever you do these things. Sometimes I've had like a cameraman talk to me afterwards. Well, you know, I've been thinking about these ideas myself. I've been having my doubts about religion. You got anything on your organization? And I whip out a brochure and give it to them. And yeah, a lot of people talk to me afterwards who find that they agree with me. For radio, you can have a crib sheet or you can have little note cards. Don't depend on these things because it's oftentimes hard in the flurry of an interview to even find things on your piece of paper. Using cards or on your piece of paper, having nice bold headlines for the different subject areas so your eye can follow it faster and find your notes on a particular thing is a good idea. And the things you primarily want to have notes about are facts and figures that you might forget the precise details. If you need to rattle off a number or a percentage figure, it's good to have that written down. And that can even work on TV. You can bring your note cards with you and study them over in the green room before you go on, and it's a nice, refresher. But you can sometimes even take them on with you. If you're sitting at a news desk type of situation where I've been, you can have a little, a few cards there in front of you. It's no big deal. I've even sitting on a couch with a little coffee table. I'll lay them down there. I may never refer to them. I may never look over, because then you're kind of looking this way and not really looking where you should be. But I know that they're there, so it kind of acts as a confidence builder. And I know that if I have to find a figure, I can grab the cards and I can look up the figure and rattle it off. And sometimes they'll switch to a different camera angle when they see you doing that, and that way it isn't that obvious. So there are times when you can do that. But certainly you can bring them to the station with you. One on radio, you want to keep your hand one hand's distance from the microphone so you don't pop your peas. And one on TV, pop your peas. Yeah, because when you say the letter P, it causes a little bit of air to blow out of your mouth, and it blows right into the microphone and goes. And if you've ever heard people popping their peas, it's a muffled sound. Any word, it doesn't sound good.
It's a delicate balance, because they also tell you to eat the microphone. You have to be right there, but if you have a P, it's difficult to.
Yeah, you don't want to be too far away, it creates echo. But I've found doing this as the distance works, and nobody complains about that. When on TV, never look at the monitor. Now, here's the thing, the TV camera is pointing at you here, and the monitor might be right there, and you want to see what you look like on TV, so your eyes are going over like this. So the TV's here, the camera's here, the monitor's there, and you're going like this, your eyes are shifting back and forth, and you look shifty-eyed on TV, and the viewer has no idea why you're doing that, so they assume you're shifty-eyed. They don't know that there's a monitor there. I made that mistake once. Once I saw myself, I go, okay, I'm never doing that again. So when I went on the Bill O'Reilly show, I was sitting there staring at the camera, because they were doing a split screen where I'm on one side, he's on the other, so they wanted me to look at the camera. I was asked, do you want the monitor on? I said, no. Because I knew darn well I would be sorely tempted to look over and see what Bill O'Reilly was doing. So I didn't see Bill O'Reilly when I did the show. I had a little earphone, I could hear him, but I could not see what he was doing. And it was better that way. I could just focus on staring at that camera and concentrating on what I was talking about, and just blot out any other distractions. And it kept me on point. It kept me on message.
Do you recommend being serious or being cheerful or being,
It varies with the situation. There was this one talk show I was on in Canada, in British Columbia, and this talk show host was this really gruff guy, but it was his manner. It was kind of a put-on sort of thing, that he was always kind of making pokes at his guests, no matter who they were, and talking in this gruff tone, and he had this Scottish accent, and it just kind of accented the whole thing. And I was debating this evangelical guy, and I decided to have fun with it. I went with it, I rolled with it, I kind of played along, I sparred back with him, back and forth. We had a little banter going. And this evangelical guy, he was so straight and stiff, and he didn't know what was going on, and he didn't know how to react to this crazy guy. And I was having fun with it, so it made him look stiff, and it made me look natural and relaxed. So there are times when you want to just play along and have fun with it. There are other times, though, if the issue is really serious, then you don't want people making light of it. And if it has tragic proportions and things like that, you don't let people get away with jokes, and you want to be very serious and determined, have a kind of a determination about you. So you're going to pick the issue. Now with Bill O'Reilly, I kept it light. It's like, why are you so upset about this? What's the fuss? That was kind of the attitude I kept. And I stayed with that throughout the segment. I didn't lose it. I stayed with that. Once you decide you're going to take a lighthearted thing, then kind of do your best to stay with it. So that's really the rule. You determine on the basis of other factors as to what's right in that environment. Yeah.
Now, I know that when you're doing some public speaking, they say if you drink a glass of water, you're perceived to be more serious or to be more truthful. Are there tricks of the trade in that regard?
Boy, I never heard that one. That's interesting. I don't use any of those kinds of things. I suppose there are advantages to wearing a blue suit rather than a brown suit for men, that blue suits actually go over better. There's been some studies on things like colors and stuff like that. But I think it's really just better to be an engaging speaker and pay attention to your audience. A lot of speakers aren't even aware of their audience. They're so lost in their speech, they don't know that there's an audience out there. So they can't tell if they're getting across or if they're not, or if the mood is against them or for them. They don't pick up on those nuances. You need to kind of pay attention to your
The audience being your interviewer? So,
well, in the case of a TV thing, you do need to watch your interviewer, yes, and watch your interviewer's facial expressions and so on. But if you're doing public speaking to an audience out there, you need to watch them. And even if you can't see them because the lights are dark out there, you can hear them. And you can hear the mumbling and grumbling, or you hear the silences in the inappropriate places. And so you know what's happening. So I kind of tend to know if a certain joke is going to go over or not before I tell it. You get to where you get used to it. Yes?
The two biggest values of having a drink of water is, one, it keeps your voice moist.
Yeah.
You don't want it to crack.
Yeah.
And second,
Time to think.
if,
made Fred thirsty.
It's
right,
fine.
power of suggestion.
Yeah.
If you are basically stopping everything to have a drink of water,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, Bill O'Reilly asks you a question, and instead of answering, you'll get a drink of water, gives you a chance to gather your thoughts, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it does also create an uncomfortable delay that audiences find annoying. So you need to find logical places to take your
Yeah.
drink of water. And I didn't have water on Bill O'Reilly. It was short enough and I wasn't going to worry about it. And I wasn't going to be taking a drink on camera. I mean, yeah, I don't do that. But now I'll tell you, one of my experiences speaking at a UU church, I asked them to bring me a glass of water and put it on the podium, and they did. It was there. But I didn't pay close enough attention to it. So then when it came time to take my sip of water, I took a sip of water and I ended up with a bunch of ice in my mouth. They had crushed ice in them. Now all of a sudden one crunch and you hear a crunch and the microphone and my teeth go down. So no ice in your water, and if they give you ice, then you're gonna have to drink it very carefully so you only get the liquid and not the ice. Look before you drink. I learned that one the hard way. Okay. Now, and as I say in my item 9, plan to have fun. So if you're going to do this kind of media stuff, enjoy it. It shouldn't be something that's really hard to do. One of the advantages of all this preparation is not that it makes you overly serious about the whole thing, but quite the opposite. It helps you relax because now you feel you know what you're doing. It gives you the confidence. It lets you know that, yes, I do have answers to these questions. I've prepared, I've thought it through. There may be surprises, but most things are not going to be surprises because I know what I'm there to do and I know what my goals are and I know what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I can keep getting to what I came there to do and not get distracted by all the other stuff that the talk show host or the interviewer might be trying to throw at me. So it gives you a confidence because you have a goal and you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. And when you know where you're going, it's easier to get there. It's when you haven't thought it through that you tend to get overly serious because you go in there nervous, like, oh no, what's going to happen? I wonder what's going to happen here. And it's like a crapshoot. It's like the roll of the dice. You don't know if it's going to go well or ill. You have no idea. In Baltimore, this guy was going to be interviewed on the TV show, and we'd gone over this. I'd done the whole seminar with him and gone over it. And he called me up and he says, I am so not ready for this interview. And I said, all right, let's go over the talking points again. What are the points? We talked them through, and he typed them, he wrote them down, and he sent them to the other. He says, well, would it be all right if I went on the show and I had this other guy with me as well? And I said, sure, have two voices, that's all right. It was particularly nice because the other guy, okay, he was an older white guy, and the other one was a younger black guy. And I said, can't beat that, you know, it's gonna show diversity, I mean, great, go with it. And so they both went on, and he came back later so pleased that the interview went so smoothly. He says, I was able to answer all the questions and knew what I was saying, and there was no surprises. And there are certainly going to be fewer surprises if you are prepared. And when I went on Bill O'Reilly, there wasn't anything he brought up that I wasn't prepared for or expecting, except when he said that Santa Claus is a Catholic saint. And but I'm familiar enough with the subject matter that I immediately knew what to say. And I just made it clear that I wasn't buying that Santa Claus was a Catholic saint, that this is a secular character created by Thomas Nast in the 1860s to secularize the holiday so Protestants could celebrate it too, and so on. And if I'd wanted to get really sarcastic, which I didn't do, I would have said, so St. Nicholas is this Turkish saint, so Santa Claus is a Turkish saint. So how many Turkish saints have sleighs pulled with reindeer and dress up in red and white outfits, snow caps? Not in Turkey, not in most parts of it anyway. So, yeah.
Fred, and now he didn't have an agenda. He wasn't trying to trip you up. He wasn't trying to show his audience that I'm religious and I'm going to prove that there is a God. Will we possibly have that agenda come up?
Well, he had his agenda. His agenda was to be totally dismissive of everything I said, and he did use his typical smart-ass dismissiveness in his manner and tone. And his whole effort was basically to try to say, look, you're just trying to screw with us Christians, you're just trying to play with us for your own advantage, and it's just not polite or appreciated. That was his whole shtick, okay? That we were attacking his religion for our own benefit. And it was all about attacking them. So this is the usual thing again. That was the agenda he was trying to get across. And I didn't let him get away with it. That's the point, is that that's what I was prepared for. That's what he did. And he just used the Santa Claus being a Catholic saint thing to as one of the elements of that. But I was well familiar with that. I've given talks on it and written essays on it, so that just played right into stuff I already know.
What if, like, you know, you have a lot of experience and given a lot of talks and stuff, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what if something comes up that I just don't know anything about?
It's okay to say you don't know. And you can even make a virtue of it. We humanists live comfortably with uncertainty. We don't know all the answers. So if they ask you some cosmic question, you can either say, I'm not a scientist, that's beyond my expertise, or you can just say, that's one of the great unanswered questions of the cosmos. But we humanists don't create fantasies to answer our questions. We live with uncertainty.
Or you just say, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's okay to admit that you don't know.
I'm not familiar with
it shows that you're honest.
Every idea that comes along. I'm not familiar with it.
So, the one thing, I think the most important thing to remember, if you're inexperienced in this, is keep doing it so you get more experience. And job one in all of these TV and radio interviews, newspaper interviews, job one is showing up. Being there and doing the show, win, lose, or draw, no matter how badly it goes for you. You show up, you do it, you tell everybody you did it, you put it on your website, you were on this show, or as seen on such and such show, because most people aren't going to have seen the show, or heard the radio show, or read the article in the newspaper, so they're not going to know how badly you did. It's like I said earlier about the press conferences, you know, if one reporter shows up, it's like, you're giving them an exclusive. And if nobody shows up to your press conference, you don't tell anybody. And no one will ever know. You had a press conference. You say, we had a press conference, because you did. Just because no reporters were there, you're not going to write back to all the reporters and say, why didn't you come? You know, you don't do that. It's like when you hold a party and nobody comes, and then you call up all your friends and, you know, cuss them out for not coming to your party. But this is, you hold your press conference, and you held your press conference.
What if they gave a war and nobody came?
Yeah, exactly. But nobody, what if they held a war and nobody came, and nobody knew that nobody came? You think we won? Yeah. Anyway, so when you go on a show, showing up, doing the show, and telling everybody you did the show. And that was the attitude I took on going on Bill O'Reilly. And when Lori Lippman Brown went on Bill O'Reilly before I did, and she asked me to give her advice on how she should handle it, I said, first thing is, you did Bill O'Reilly. No matter what else, you can always say you did Bill O'Reilly. And two is that if you go on these shows and you do really well, you get all these calls from all these people saying, wow, you know, you did really well, I want to join your organization. And if you go on the show and you do really badly, you get all these calls from people who say, that talk show host treated you so badly, I support you, I want to join your organization. And so you get just as many people either way, because I've had both happen. And I get exactly the same amount of reaction. So the people who like us are on our side no matter what. And the people who don't like us are against us no matter what. So there are plenty of people who probably watch that YouTube Bill O'Reilly thing and think that I just did a terrible job and Bill O'Reilly kicked my butt. You know, I mean, I can't keep people from thinking what they think.
We're after the independent voters.
Yeah, exactly. So, show up, win, lose, or draw, you're going to get a certain amount of audience, and you're going to get experience, and you're going to get better at it. So it isn't really about winning debates. It's about getting your talking points across. That's when it's really successful. So, you're going to give the contact information. You're going to tell who you are and why you're there unless the host does it for you. And you're going to listen carefully to each statement or question before responding. This is the other thing. You do all this preparation that I talk about, but you don't go in there with all that preparation in the conscious focus of your mind, because then you won't pay attention to what the host is asking you. You then need to get in the moment with the host, in the zone, and just participate in the conversation like you or I would have a conversation. And just be there. You've already done your prep, okay? It'll come to you when you need it. Don't worry about it. You've done your prep, you've gone over your note cards in the green room or whatever. Now just do the bloody show. Just go on there, have fun with it, and talk to the guy. And then if he throws you a ringer, like, well, what if you're an atheist, what do you say when people sneeze? Or throws you some other thing that you couldn't possibly have expected, you can take it much more lightly. You can say, and in fact, I'm sure I've said this at one time or another, where they ask me something so off the wall, and you say, now there's a question I wasn't expecting. You know, you can just say that. You can just be honest. Say, now that's pretty clever of you.
Haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. To give you a chance to think of an answer while you're saying all this.
And I'm not really sure how to respond to that.
Yeah, you can even say, can we come back to that? Yeah. Anyway. You want to open a question, when they ask you a question, you want to open with a short answer. You don't know how long they're going to let you go on and talk about a given issue. So you better get your basic point across first. Just like when writing a press release where you put the most important thing first and you put it briefly and you get your basic part of your news story, the current part across first, and then you fill in the details as you go down, typical news story writing style. Okay, well, same way with when you're in an interview with a reporter, when you're on a radio or a TV talk show, give a short answer first and then flesh it out. Don't feel you have to get all convoluted, and don't start at the wrong end of it. Say, well, here, let me give you a little setup for this first, and then I'll hit you with my punchline. You don't do it that way. Punchline first, setup afterwards. You give a brief answer, and then you build the details in, and then wherever they cut you off, that just means they've only cut you off at the details. You still got your basic point across. And find every excuse to move to your talking points. You're not likely to be so lucky that you're going to have these talking points and then they're going to ask you questions that naturally lead to your talking points. It isn't going to be that easy most of the time. So, therefore, they're going to ask you the wrong question. So you need to find a way to bend that question toward your talking points, to answer the question but move in the direction of your talking points. Now, what you definitely don't want to do is you don't want to pull a Sarah Palin and say, well, that isn't the question I came to answer. The question I came to answer is this one, and then answer that. You know,
Politicians do that all the time, though.
Yeah.
Not just her. I mean, they never really answer that question.
Right, I know, and people don't like it. They don't like politicians dodging questions. So you don't dodge.
They talk about what they want to talk about.
Well, you do, and you do want to talk about what you want to talk about. You want to move the interview in your direction, but you first answer the question. So if they ask you a totally wrong question that doesn't help you any, go ahead and answer it. It's totally irrelevant, but answer it, but just give it a short answer. And then say, but this misses the real point. Or the real issue is this. Or, something like that. So you've answered the question before moving. Don't dodge. If you're seen to dodge, they're going to say, oh, this person can't face up to the questions. They're just dodging them, and then they don't trust you. They don't think you know anything. So answer the question.
You know, politicians, and it drives us all crazy, refuse to answer questions directly.
Yeah.
They deflect all over the place.
Yeah.
And pretty soon everybody's forgotten what the original question was. And one of the reasons I'm sure they do that is because they don't want to take a side.
Right.
Because everybody else is not ever going to vote for them. All right? If they say they're pro-life, then anybody who's pro-choice will be never vote for them.
Yeah.
So they won't say it.
Yeah.
We have an advantage.
Right, because we are cause organization.
We are taking a side.
Yeah. And
So we don't have to deflect.
There was a great line in some TV drama that I was watching, and Alan Arkin was playing a politician, and one of his
That was the thing with Joe Tynan.
I'm not sure anyway, one of his aides was a strong advocate for something and wanted to get him to advocate it. And politicians have to do a lot of log rolling and compromising and all this stuff. And so he says to this young person who's really pushing this important agenda, on principle. He says, look, if you want to be that principled, go join a cause organization and don't be a politician. So it was a very frank thing, but that's it. We get to be as radical as we want to be. Okay? We get to say whatever we want to say, and in fact, the more outrageous we are, the more likely we're going to be listened to. So, therefore, we need to say things firmly. We don't take a stance, we take a stand. Okay? We are firm in our convictions. We're forthright and vigorous. And then you attract more people to you, because we're not trying to win everybody's vote like a politician. We're trying to get our audience to come through our door. So we appeal directly to our audience and to the hell with the rest of you. Okay? Just our audience. That's the point. Get our audience in the door. So that's where you have to be precise and frank. You're not trying to make friends with all your enemies. You're trying to make friends with your friends. Be nice to your enemies. Don't make needless enemies out of them. But at the same time, focus on the people you want. So you find every excuse to move to your talking points. You have nice, firm, strong talking points. And once you've covered your talking points, let's suppose the interview goes really swimmingly and they ask you all the right questions and you answer them and you've covered your 3 talking points. What do you do now? Now do you feel you get to talk about whatever you want? No, you go back to your talking points and you work them again, just in different words, and you keep trying to get your message across, because this is not an academic debate or discussion. This is not an educational opportunity. This is advertising. Okay, this is where you connect your organization's name to your message. So that's what you keep doing. And save the essays for your website. Save the lectures for your meetings. But when you're on TV, when you're writing a letter to the editor, when you're talking to a reporter, you're basically trying to promote your group. And so get them in the door. That's the job you're there to do. So that means avoid digressions into side issues. Keep to your mission and your points. Just don't let them distract you too much and go all over the map. Because then people watching the show, they won't know what your point is, and you'll not have gotten your point across, and you get lost. I mean, we love to debate. We atheists and humanists and freethinkers, we love to debate. But this isn't the time and place to do it. It's going to be tempting, and there are going to be times when you know the answer and you go ahead and you give it, but try not to get dragged in. Get back to your talking points. And aim to keep your answers positive if you can. Figure out, again, that's why I said in the planning that you want to find positive ways of phrasing your things, so that what you're advocating isn't just, I don't like this, and stop that, and don't do that anymore, which often is our message. You know, a lot of what we tend to say is, you stop that. And I think that our message needs to be something like, let's do this instead. This is beneficial. Have some positive element. But whenever you have to counterattack, do it. But do it briefly and don't create new openings to be attacked in turn. Be very careful about this, but when you have to fight back, fight back. Now, I think that one mistake I made that particularly stands out for me in the Bill O'Reilly thing is that early on in the segment, unfortunately it was early on, which means that everyone would forget about it by the time you get to the end. But early on, I let him go on a little too long, saying too many things before I jumped in and contradicted him. Because I thought he was going to shut up any second, and so therefore I didn't want to be contradicting him needlessly, but I let it go on too long. But once I got his rhythm, then I thought, okay, then I know what I need to do now. And so after that, when he would say something, he'd say, no, it's this, and I'd say, no, it's not. And if he contradicted me back, I contradicted him back. And that I wasn't going to let him get away with certain things. So that's the point, that it's okay. If somebody is saying something false, it's okay to interrupt them and make them stop that or correct them. But don't try to talk over them too much, because one of the other things he would do is when he saw me making a point that he really didn't want to have get heard, he'd start talking over me. And they can do that to you. And when two people are talking at the same time, nobody hears anything. So don't get caught up too much in that. But don't let people ride roughshod over you and get away with anything either. Be willing to fight back. Don't be too shy or retiring because you don't want to be offensive. Shoot back and say that something is false if it's false.
Are we going to do any like role-playing of interviewing?
No, I suppose we could if you want to, because I only have a little bit more material to cover, and we could do that if you'd like to. We could do a little of that. All right, let's see. Okay, here's the thing, number 13, a lot of people don't quite get. Never repeat negatives. People will say something negative about you or your group, and while you're trying to think of how you're going to respond, there's sometimes a tendency to repeat what they said. So they'll say, so you atheists believe in nothing, right? And then you answer, do we atheists believe in nothing? Well, no. Well, you just repeated the error. You see, you just reinforced the wrong thing. So instead of repeating the error, because when you repeat errors in the process of correcting them, they only remember the error. Nobody remembers the correction. And there's been studies done. So instead you say, that's nonsense. And after that you follow up with, here's what we atheists believe or value or support or stand for. And then you start rattling off those things, and you leave the question in the dust. You see, you're talking now about what you think and what you value and what you believe and what's important to you, and you haven't repeated that we believe in nothing. You're showing them what we value.
So he can't contradict it at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, maybe you don't like the word belief, but don't say, no, we don't have any beliefs. We just have facts and truth and knowledge. I mean, don't repeat that. Just go at, we hold these views, or these are our values, or these are our positions. You know, whatever words you prefer to believe is fine. Now, when asked multiple questions, this is a great one. Talk show hosts who are hostile to you will ask you a series of questions all at once. Now they shoot 3 questions. Boom, boom, boom. Just before I did Bill O'Reilly, I was on a radio show with an equally hostile conservative woman, and I was on much longer. In fact, I was glad I did that show because it would actually made it easier to do Bill O'Reilly afterwards, because when I found I could handle her, O'Reilly was a piece of cake. But what she did throughout the show is, okay, she'd pontificate for a while, and so I couldn't say anything, I just had to wait out her pontificating, and then she would hit me with 3 questions that were unrelated. The aim trying to get me to chase my tail, to try to answer the first question, and then while I'm struggling with the first question and trying to get to the other 2, then she hits me with 3 more. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, you have you chasing your tail. Instead, the way you handle the triple question trick is that you treat it as an opportunity. It's multiple choice. You get to pick the question you'd like to answer. They've given you 3 choices, so you go after the one you like, or the one that fits your talking points, or the one in which you're going to be able to score a big hit. And the audience will forget about the other 2 questions. And if the talk show host comes back and says, but you didn't answer the other 2, say, all right, let me take on the other ones. And then you pick one of the other ones and you go after it. But what she did was, I'd answer 1, then she'd hit me with 3 more, and I'd answer 1, and she'd hit me with 3 more, and we progressed through the interview that way. And every one of my answers was strong, because I picked the question I liked that I could answer most strongly and just went for it, and I just ignored it. Didn't even let it bother me. Didn't have them on my mind. I couldn't even tell you what those other ones were.
What was her goal? To get you to be confused, or to say later, you didn't answer my questions?
It was to get me to be confused, to get me chasing my tail. See? And sometimes if you're debating someone on radio, your opponent will pull that on you. And so again, and you don't want to say, you're hitting me with too many questions, I can't possibly answer them all. Don't say that. Just pick the one you want and go after. And then just keep moving forward. And as long as you keep moving forward, people forget. And it's the same way when you're writing a letter to the editor that answers a letter to the editor. Someone will write a letter to the editor and they'll maybe say 3 or 4 things against our views. And you're so tempted, you want to parse each one of those and knock each one of them down. But they're not going to give you enough letter writing space to do it. You just pick one. And you say, in so-and-so's letter of last week, he addressed this issue, or I'd like to address this point and point out in contradiction to what he said, blah, blah, blah. And you give your answer without repeating the error or make allusion to it without directly repeating it, and just ignore the other things they said, because the only people who are going to clip out both of them and compare them side by side to see if all the questions were answered are people like us. Okay, nobody else is going to do that. So don't even worry about it. Each letter stands on its own. Each daily paper is a thing of itself, and the past is dead. So it's okay to just ignore what you want to ignore. When asked the wrong question, answer it directly and then move to one of your talking points. When asked something you don't know, admit that you don't know. We covered that. And keep track of time so you can end on a strong note. When you're on a talk show, they say, oh, we're going to be on for a half hour. Well, when does that half hour end, really? Turns out usually there's a newscast or a commercial break or something before the hour or half hour ends. And you need to know that, so that you don't get caught in the middle of an argument, that you finish strong. And after it's over, thank people for giving you the opportunity. If you were on a panel discussion, swap business cards and take notes on people's addresses and so on. And then learn when the show was aired and how you can access it. All right, so those are the main things there for your talking points, sound bites, and TV interview reminders. Okay, would some of you like to do a little role play? Would you like to play?
I would.
You would.
Because I'm going to be in this situation.
All right. Well, let's do a little setup here. We can do this. I'm going to move this table back. We'll set this up. This is going to be close, not too close to the camera if we do it here. Let's you and I do a seat, and we'll do a couple of things here. Grab that chair. We'll sit like this, I suppose.
Good.
Yeah, you're facing the camera and I'm the interviewer talking to you. All right, so you want to cover the billboard? Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, keep with some typical questions. I
Okay.
haven't prepared, obviously, but
All right, no, that's fine.
this
All right.
will help me.
Sure, all right. So why did you people put up this billboard?
Well, because we wanted to reach out to people in our community who may have the same views that we do.
Well, what are your views?
Our views are that there is no deity, no supernatural deity out there that many people call God, and that...
So you want to get people to stop believing in God?
No, we're not trying to convert anyone or change anyone's views. We want to reach people who already have that view.
Who already don't believe in God?
Already don't believe in God, yes.
Yeah, okay. And why? I mean, what are you going to do when these people contact you? I mean, what do they want?
Well, we just want to let them know that we're here and we're part of their community. So if people want to be involved in a community of non-believers, we're here to fulfill that for them.
Well, and how do you fulfill that? I mean, what are they gonna get out of it?
Well, we have lectures, we do charitable work in our community. The Houston Free Thought Alliance is comprised of many different organizations, so the different organizations do different types of things.
All right, so you do charitable work and you have lectures. All right, is that it? I mean, do you guys ever do anything for fun?
We have parties, we have happy hours.
Happy hour. So you,
You're a bunch of drinkers.
so yeah, all right, you have parties and happy hours. What do you do at your parties? So, why would I want to come to an atheist party?
Because we socialize with each other, we like to have fun, and it's just a way to get to know each other better.
Okay, here's where you miss the opportunity to talk about celebrating the winter solstice.
Okay.
I mean, this is, it isn't just parties and drinking, it's, well, we celebrate the holidays just like a lot of other people do. And so because we recognize that the winter holidays have been around longer than Christianity, they're pre-Christian. So we celebrate them too. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. See, you're giving new information.
Okay.
And then you can talk about maybe some of the things you do at your solstice.
Do you put up a Christmas tree?
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's
You
another
might-
one. Say, you put up a Christmas tree, but you're not a Christian.
Well, Christmas trees were around long before Christianity was.
Oh, okay. And, yeah,
Pagan.
It's a solstice tree.
yeah. You can say, it's okay to say pagan if you want to.
You can say before Christianity,
Yeah, or you
people
can say-
celebrated the solstice with greenery.
Oh, but
and with
not before
lights.
the idea of, never mind.
No,
I was
yeah.
gonna just say.
So or you just say it's pre-Christian, yeah. It's actually from Northern Europe. I just throw in Northern Europe, it's Northern European,
Could be anywhere.
origin. You throw these things around. The mistletoe, by the way, is Welsh, and anyway. Okay.
But up to that point, you did fantastic.
No, you were doing really well.
Okay.
So that's why I just stopped to give you that one tip. Yeah, get the solstice in there. And you can mention Darwin Day if you do that, or any of these other things you do. Ban Books Week. That way it gives a little substance, and people who, that way you're not on the defensive. Instead of just, I'm throwing these things at you and you're quick coming up with an answer, you're being proactive, just saying, oh, this is an opportunity for me to talk about this great thing we do, and that fun thing. Oh, I bet you didn't know that we celebrate Ban Books Week if when you talk about that. It's just a great opportunity to make your group look interesting.
Okay.
Camp Quest,
Yeah,
We can talk about it.
yeah,
and
yeah.
our newsletter.
Well, the newsletter won't be, oh, a newsletter, oh boy. No, Camp Quest is better. And then, and Camp Quest, you can just say very briefly, say, it's a camp for free-thinking kids. And just kind of leave it at that, unless they want to know more. But yeah, rattle off a few things, because think of this as a promotional opportunity. So that's why you have a few notes of things. Oh, these would be good things to stress if I'm asked why we want to do this, what our groups do.
Yeah, okay.
And say, well, now you say on your billboard, you are not alone. So are atheists lonely people?
No, we're very social people, which is why we have the Houston Free Thought Alliance to help us come together and do things together.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, very good. All right, very positive. Good. Okay. Say, well, why are so many people getting so upset about this billboard? I mean, people are finding it offensive.
Well, I think that, I don't know how to answer that.
Then the way you answer it is, you say, actually, most of the response we're getting is positive.
Oh,
Even if it wasn't?
It's good, no, it's going to be true. No, it's going to be true.
Wherever this billboard has gone up in other cities, most of the response has been positive. That is a fact you can state, even if you don't know what your own response is going to be.
so actually, most of the response has been positive, and people are very glad to know that we have the Houston Free Thought Alliance here, in Houston that they can join and become involved with.
Okay, very good.
As one more choice.
What?
Should we say it's another choice for people? to make?
Yeah, you can always just say, yeah, you have one more option that people can choose. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, why do you mention God in your billboard? I mean, you don't believe in a God, so why do you talk about God if you don't believe in God?
It's a good question.
This is why I wanted to roll.
No, yeah, that's awesome, because you'll get hit with these, yeah.
Okay, well,
Fred, why do you mention God on your billboard?
yeah, mention God because that's one of the distinguishing characteristics. It's one of the things that makes us different in a lot of people's minds. It may not be important to us, but it seems to be enough to keep people quiet. And we want people to know that they don't have to stay in the closet about their view. Even if they don't believe in God to the point where they don't even want to think about it most of the time, other people make a big issue of it. Okay, here's one. Most people just assume you believe in God if you don't say anything.
Yeah.
It's just a common assumption. They just
True.
take it for granted.
Especially if you're a good person, you must be.
Yeah, they'll even say, and this is a good one you can say, people even say to us, well, why are you such a nice person if you don't believe in God? Or well, I know you don't believe in God, but you're such a nice person.
And that can lead into saying that we're just like everybody else.
Right. And say a lot of people are surprised by that. We don't think it's surprising, but other people do. Because we live in a culture where this is assumed.
I was thinking about saying something about, there's a study out there and I have to look it up, but something like 66% of people don't trust atheists or people who don't.
There was a study.
I mean, that's negative though. I mean,
Just say that there was, you could mention the survey that says we're the most distrusted group in America,
yeah.
and we'd like to change that. We're here to change that false perception.
Right.
You can bring that up if it seems appropriate, but rather than focus on, like you pointed out, the negative, that we're a mistrusted group, see, you don't want to wear the oppression card too heavily. You can mention that that this assumption is made about us, and I sometimes will say some people they're afraid to speak out at work, and they're afraid to tell their families how they feel, and we want to change the culture so that people don't need to be afraid to be honest about their views.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
And from what we know, there are about 27 people in Congress who don't believe in God, but only one has come up. So we want to change the culture.
And possibly a president.
Yeah, well, we won't go so far.
I don't think I'll say that.
Don't speculate.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, don't speculate on it anyway. Yeah, but you can say that Barack Obama was raised as a secular humanist, and his mother was a secular humanist, and Obama said so in his
Then he went to a
biography.
Christian church.
Yeah, he
for
later.
many years.
Yes, he did. He later converted, but he was raised this way. So it's part of his background, just as being around Islam is part of his background. So, and this is a diverse nation. We believe in diversity. That's another positive thing. We believe in diversity, and we are part of that diversity that makes America.
And we believe in respecting, having our opinions respected as well as respecting other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Some of us do anyway.
Yeah. So I've noticed that whenever you're confident, you speak very clearly. You don't hedge your points. You just go right to it and you speak without ums and all that. That's very, very good. So then the only thing you need then is you just need to know what your points are and what you're going to say. So when they hit you with stuff, you just go right through it.
Okay.
I think you've got it.
Good job.
Yeah, good job.
Very good.
Well, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I need to get moving.
All right, I'm gonna hand you the last
Oh,
handout. And then for those who can stay for it, I'll cover it very briefly, but I'll give you the last time to make sure you get it. This is about online social media.
Okay.
Because if you do Facebook and all of that stuff, if you do blogs and all this, this is the basic stuff you need to keep in mind.
No one else is gonna role play?
Fred, I need one too, please.
Nobody else is gonna role play?
I need one too, please. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
No, because we're not volunteering to get on the news.
Yeah. Well, you should, but we don't have to do, I think watching the role play gives you a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
All right, but let me just make the basic point that you need a good, solid internet presence for any use of online social media to be effective. So you need a strong Facebook page, or certainly, most importantly, a strong website that you keep updated and keep current and it's attractive and that you direct people to. Whenever you send emails out, whenever you post messages to blogs, whenever you post comments, you want to have a signature line that's automatic on your emails or your postings that says your name and your title with your organization and your web URL, so that it's automatic. Even when you're not talking about that subject, it's always there, so that you're always subtly promoting, but without looking like you're constantly promoting. And the way to understand the new social media is online social media constitutes the world's largest cocktail party, because now you're not going indirectly through the traditional media to reach your audience. You're going direct to the people you want to reach. That's what's important about social media. And so it's like a cocktail party. Well, now think what you would find acceptable at a cocktail party. If someone was an insurance salesman and everybody they talked to at the cocktail party, they were trying to sell insurance to them, people wouldn't invite that person to the cocktail party anymore. So you don't constantly push your agenda every time you use social media. Instead, you follow the 1/3 rule. The 1/3 rule is 1/3 of your time pushing your agenda. 1/3 of your time sharing information of a similar nature to an audience that's interested in that, but that comes from other people, not just your group. And the third thing is then just random socializing. No, that's the 1/3. So relevant and interesting stuff, but from other sources, your stuff, and general socializing. Be a real human being. Don't be totally business-like all the time in your social media context. You want to be a real human being.
Should we be appointing somebody to follow Twitter conversations about this billboard campaign?
Yes, that's what comes, if you turn to page 2, top 10 conversations to listen in on. You listen in on the conversations, because at a cocktail party, you could overhear people talking about you. Well, you certainly can on the internet. So you need Google alerts, so that every time your organization or your group is mentioned, you know about it. That you can monitor your campaign, that's number 6, you can monitor your campaign. If people are complaining about your group, they attended a meeting and nobody greeted them and they felt alone, and then they post some negative thing, you can actually chime in a nice way and thank them for their feedback, even though they weren't talking directly to you, and promise to make it better next time. You can catch people when they're interested and at their point of need. You can try to pick up Twitter. You can also get Twitter alerts. You can find out what the blogs are saying about you. Yes, you want to monitor your campaign. And in social networking, quirky and offbeat works best when you want to put an idea out there or a story out there. You want something to go viral, it should be just like what we were talking about publicity stunts earlier. They need to be quirky and interesting and challenging. So when I titled my talk, The Joy of Godless Sex, that was quirky, that was interesting, and it got repeated on the blogs, even though it was just a local talk I gave in Washington, D.C. I later got contacted by a college in Wisconsin. They want to have me up there to give that talk to them, and they were willing to pay my way just because they saw it on the blogs and just because I gave it a quirky title. So that's one of the things that really works in social media, is something interesting.
All of a sudden you're an expert.
Yeah. I think most of this stuff is kind of spelled out in the handout. It should speak for itself. Does anyone, A lot of people use social media, but they just use it recreationally. If you can use it recreationally, you can use it to promote your group. Almost every organization now has a Facebook page, so it's something to think about for you as well. Any questions on social media? Okay. Well, that's the seminar. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Very informative, thank you.
Thank you.